Hello, you magnificent time traveller you. Tonight, we're not just unfolding a page of history, we're ripping it out, giving it a good shake, and seeing what hilarious, terrifying bits fall out. Maybe you're tucked in bed, phone light dim, ready for a cosy journey. Or maybe you've just decided the past is more entertaining than your actual to-do list. Where are you joining me from? Drop a comment if you dare. I love knowing which corners of the modern world are currently ditching their responsibilities for a peek at medieval madness. And hey, if you find comfort in the slow, thoughtful, and slightly unhinged stories of the folks who came before us, I'd be honoured if you subscribed. Consider it your one-way ticket to historical hijinks. Your first sensation upon waking? The luxurious weight of sheets so fine they'd make a modern thread-count snob weep with joy. These aren't your typical medieval rough-and-tumble linen. These are the I own a kingdom and then some kind of sheets. Your bed, a fortress of carved oak and silk, would be in a private chamber, a concept so mind-bogglingly luxurious to a peasant, they'd probably assume you were doing some kind of dark magic in there. Peasants, bless their hearts, were busy spooning with their livestock. You, however, were spooning with thread counts. You might even find yourself wondering if these sheets were spun by actual angels. They're that soft. And the mattress? Forget lumpy straw. This is probably filled with the finest goose down, imported from who knows where, just to ensure your royal posterior gets the best rest possible. As consciousness fully returns, you'd hear the soft shuffle of servants' feet, probably not trying to sneak a peek, just trying to make sure your morning doesn't start with a dramatic "I woke up on the floor" incident. The gentle clink of silver and pewter would herald a meal so epic, most commoners would think you'd captured a unicorn and were serving its delicious, sparkly bits for breakfast. Your personal attendants, be they ladies-in-waiting, read professional gossips and dress-uppers, or your loyal valet, likely a long-suffering man who'd seen too much, would already be laying out your clothes. And, oh, the clothes. Not some scratchy wool tunic that screams, "I wrestle pigs for a living," but garments of silk, velvet, and fine wool, dyed in colours so vibrant they'd make a rainbow look like a beige crayon. The sheer quantity of fabric alone would make a modern minimalist faint. Dressing wouldn't be a quick jeans and t-shirt affair. This was an extreme sport of layering. First, the linen undergarments, because even royalty got swampy. Then the main event, followed by an outer robe that probably weighed more than you did. Your clothing would be adorned with precious metals, jewels, and embroidery that practically screamed, "My ancestors owned this place, and I'm here to prove it." The very act of getting dressed required multiple servants, because those complex fastenings, laces, and heavy fabrics practically demanded an Olympic-level team effort. Imagine trying to tie yourself into a corset, then add multiple layers of heavy brocade and ermine, all before your first cup of coffee. It's a workout. Your morning meal, delivered on silver platters, would be a feast that would make a modern-day influencer blush. Fresh white bread, from wheat so fine it probably had its own bodyguard, honeyed cakes, roasted meats, exotic fruits that probably took 6 months to get there, and spiced wine. While a commoner might taste meat only on special occasions, like if a squirrel tragically stumbled into their cooking pot, your table would groan under the weight of venison, fowl, and delicacies, imported from lands so distant they might as well have been on the moon. You'd be sampling new tastes and textures every day, a stark contrast to the monotonous gruel and hardtack that made up the diet of most of your subjects. And no, there wasn't a drive-through for spiced wine back then. But this opulent lifestyle came with its own unique set of challenges. You wouldn't just be lounging in luxury. You'd be thrust into a political web so tangled, even a spider would get confused. Your crown wasn't just a fashion statement. It was a target. Every gilded ornament, every shimmering jewel was a beacon for ambition, envy, and outright betrayal. Your daily schedule? Rigorously structured like a medieval PowerPoint presentation. Morning prayers were mandatory, because even the highest nobility were expected to demonstrate their piety. Apparently, God really liked a good show of devotion, even if you were secretly planning to invade your neighbour's chicken coop later. These weren't quick, mumbled prayers either. We're talking long, formal services in a private chapel, often led by a priest who probably knew more about your family's dirty laundry than you did. Following prayers, you'd likely hold court, which sounds fancy, but was basically a medieval version of Judge Judy. Vassals, merchants, and petitioners would line up, eager for your judgment on everything from property disputes to accusations of "that guy totally stole my cow." The weight of these choices would be enormous. Your judgments could mean the difference between life and death. No pressure, right? Just the minor detail of holding someone's entire existence in your perfectly manicured hands. You'd quickly learn that justice in this era often had less to do with right and wrong, and more to do with power and who owed whom a favour. The political landscape of medieval Europe was a treacherous, shifting mess. Alliances shifted faster than a bad toupee in a hurricane. Today's trusted ally? Tomorrow's mortal enemy. Probably because you accidentally complimented their rival's horse. Marriage wasn't about love, it was about, who can I combine my land with to make an even bigger land monster? Your spouse would be chosen to strengthen political ties, secure territory, or end conflicts. Children? Forget bundles of joy. They were political assets, betrothed from birth to cement future alliances, or traded like precious commodities to advance family interests. Forget ballet lessons. Your kids were learning advanced diplomacy by age 5, probably negotiating their allowance based on strategic alliances with the cook. Your castle or manor? Less of a cosy home, more of a bustling, slightly damp administrative centre. It housed not just your family, but dozens or even hundreds of servants, soldiers, and retainers. It was basically a medieval co-working space, except everyone lived there. Scribes copying letters, probably complaining about carpal tunnel. Stewards managing your vast estates, and likely skimming a bit off the top. Knights training in the courtyard, making a delightful clanging noise, and servants maintaining the complex machinery of noble household management, which mostly involved shouting orders and hoping things got done. The air would be thick with the smell of wood smoke, roasting meat, and a faint undercurrent of needs a good airing out. Perhaps the most jarring aspect of your new life would be the constant awareness of mortality. Even as nobility, you lived with the knowledge that death could come suddenly and violently. Warfare was endemic, and you were expected to lead your armies personally. Imagine your modern boss saying, "Great quarter, now go lead these people into battle with swords." Political rivals might resort to assassination, because a strongly worded memo just wasn't dramatic enough. And even medical treatment? Primitive by modern standards. A bad cold could turn into a full-blown game-over scenario. No antibiotics, just leeches, and a lot of praying. The Black Death, which had swept through Europe just years before our imagined scenario, would cast a long shadow over daily life. This devastating plague had killed an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population, sparing neither peasant nor prince. The psychological impact? Basically, everyone was living with a permanent sense of, well, this is probably how I'm going to die, leading to an intense focus on spiritual preparation and the afterlife, because when death is literally around every corner, you start thinking about your eternal frequent flyer miles. The sermons would be extra long, and everyone would be a bit too eager to confess their sins, just in case. Your education, if you were lucky enough to get one, revolved around military training, religious instruction, and the complex etiquette of court life. Literacy, while valued, wasn't universal, even among nobility. Many nobles couldn't read or write, relying on educated clerks, the original ghostwriters, and scribes. If you were literate, your reading material consisted primarily of religious texts, because God, classical works, because smart, and chivalric romances, because knights were basically the superheroes of their day. Forget novels. Your entertainment came from tales of valiant knights rescuing damsels in distress, often while covered in mud. The concept of privacy as we understand it today simply didn't exist. Your personal chambers might offer some solitude, but your daily life unfolded before the constant gaze of servants, courtiers, and visitors. Every meal, every conversation, every decision was observed and analysed for political significance. Gossip and intrigue would swirl around you constantly, like a particularly venomous medieval Twitter feed. Ambitious courtiers sought to advance their own positions by becoming experts in your moods and preferences. Basically, your life was a permanent reality show, and everyone was a contestant, vying for your favour like it was the grand prize. Your relationship with common people would be complex and largely distant. while you might occasionally encounter peasants during travels, probably when your carriage wheel fell off, or during public ceremonies, where they were there to gawk. The vast gulf between noble and commoner meant their daily struggles were largely invisible to you. The grinding poverty, constant hunger, and back-breaking labour that defined peasant existence would be as foreign to your experience as life on another planet. You'd be nibbling on imported figs while they were contemplating whether grass was edible. The thought of a peasant's daily meal might make your spiced wine curdle. The seasonal rhythms would still touch your existence, though in very different ways. Spring would bring the need to organise planting for your tenants, because someone had to grow your fancy wheat. Summer might see military campaigns, because warm weather meant easier travel for the "let's go poke our neighbours with pointy sticks" brigade. Autumn would bring the harvest, a crucial time when the year's success or failure would be determined, affecting not just your wealth but your ability to feed your household through the winter months. Winter in a medieval castle would be a time of relative isolation, as poor roads and harsh weather limited travel. Your household would draw inward, relying on stored provisions and preserved foods to survive until spring. Entertainment during these long months might include feasts, musical performances, storytelling, and indoor games. Basically, medieval Netflix and chill, but with more drafts and definitely no actual Netflix. The religious calendar would punctuate your year with festivals, fasts, and holy days. Easter and Christmas would be times of great celebration, marked by elaborate feasts and gift-giving. The 40 days of Lent would require even nobles to observe periods of fasting and penance, though your version of deprivation would still surpass the daily fare of most commoners. You'd be fasting on a nice piece of fish, while the peasants were fasting because they literally had nothing else. It's all about perspective, right? Your wardrobe was a visible proclamation of your status. Fine furs from distant lands, silk imported from the east, and precious metals worked into intricate jewellery. Sumptuary laws actually regulated what colours and fabrics different social classes could wear, ensuring that clothing served as an immediate identifier of social rank. No peasant was accidentally showing up in purple velvet unless they had a death wish, or were really, really bad at following instructions. The question of succession would hang constantly over your household. Producing legitimate heirs was not just a personal desire, but a political necessity. The death of a lord without clear succession could plunge entire regions into warfare. If you were female, your value was largely determined by your ability to form advantageous marriages and produce male heirs. No pressure, ladies, just the fate of the entire family line resting on your uterus and your ability to look charming while doing it. Your daily diet included luxuries most people could never imagine. Exotic spices from the east, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, were literally worth their weight in gold, yet they appeared regularly on your table. Fresh meat would be available year-round, either from your own hunting expeditions, because nothing says power like chasing a deer with a pack of dogs, or from your carefully managed livestock. You'd have a personal butcher, a baker, and probably a candle maker. The concept of personal hygiene, while different from modern standards, still set you apart. You'd have access to soap, perfumes, and regular bathing, luxuries peasants rarely afforded. Your clothing would be changed regularly, and you'd have servants dedicated to maintaining your appearance and comfort. Basically, you smelled a lot better than everyone else, which in medieval times was a significant advantage. But beneath all this luxury ran an undercurrent of violence and uncertainty. Medieval justice was swift and brutal. Executions, mutilations, and public floggings were common punishments you might be expected to witness or even order. The sight of heads mounted on castle walls or bodies hanging from gibbets would be unremarkable parts of the landscape. Your military obligations were very real and potentially deadly. You'd be expected to provide knights and soldiers for your overlord's armies, and quite possibly to lead them personally into battle. Medieval warfare was brutal and chaotic. Even with the best armour, survival in battle was far from guaranteed. It wasn't about strategic manoeuvres, it was often just a messy brawl with swords and axes. The political intrigue of court life required constant vigilance. A careless word could create enemies who might plot your downfall for years. The rise and fall of noble families was often swift and dramatic. Today's powerful duke could become tomorrow's exiled traitor, stripped of lands and titles, possibly even executed for treason. No job security here. Your severance package might be a one-way trip to the chopping block. Your relationship with the church was complex. While personal piety was expected, the church was also a major political force. Bishops and abbots wielded significant temporal power, controlling vast lands and wealth. Your donations to the church were both a spiritual obligation and a political necessity, as ecclesiastical support could make or break noble careers. You'd be constantly navigating the fine line between pleasing God and keeping your earthly power intact. The education of your children was carefully planned. Sons would be trained in warfare, hunting, and the management of estates. They might be sent to serve as pages and squires in other noble households, learning the complex code of chivalry that governed knightly behaviour. Daughters would be educated in the household management, music, and the social graces necessary for advantageous marriages. Essentially, your children were being groomed for their roles in the grand political game from birth. Your castle or manor house was a marvel of medieval engineering and luxury, yet still primitive by modern standards. Massive stone walls provided security, but also created damp, cold living conditions. Fireplaces offered warmth and light, but also filled rooms with smoke. Glass windows, if you had them at all, were small and provided little clear view of the outside world. It was like living in a very fancy, very drafty cave, but with a moat. The feast hall was the centre of your social life. Elaborate meals served multiple political and social functions. The seating arrangements at your table communicated complex hierarchies of status and favour. The quality and variety of food demonstrated your wealth and power to guests and rivals. These feasts weren't merely social gatherings, but important political events where alliances were forged and status affirmed. Basically, every dinner party was a potential diplomatic incident, and you were the ultimate host, trying to keep everyone happy and not plotting against you. Your household staff would number in the dozens or hundreds. Stewards managed estates, chamberlains oversaw personal quarters, marshals commanded military forces, and chaplains tended to spiritual needs. The complex web of relationships among these servants created its own political dynamics that you'd need to navigate carefully. It was like managing a small, very dramatic company, where everyone had their own agenda and a keen eye on your every move. Travelling between your various properties was a major undertaking involving hundreds of people and countless wagons of supplies. These journeys served multiple purposes, overseeing your lands, demonstrating your power, and maintaining the complex network of relationships that held the feudal system together. It was a royal road trip, but with less snacks and more mud and the constant threat of bandits. Your library, if you possessed one, would be a treasure trove of hand-copied manuscripts. Books were rare and precious objects, each one representing months or years of scribal labour. The knowledge contained in these volumes, everything from classical philosophy to agricultural techniques, would give you significant advantages over less educated rivals. Basically, you had the ultimate Wikipedia, but it took a monk a year to write each entry. The question of loyalty permeated every relationship. Vassals owed you service and obedience, but their loyalty could shift. Servants and retainers depended on your favour, creating complex dynamics of dependence. Even family relationships were coloured by political considerations and inheritance disputes. Everyone was potentially out for themselves, and you'd have to constantly assess who you could truly trust, if anyone. Your death, when it eventually came, would trigger a complex series of legal and political processes. Your lands and titles would need to be transferred to your heirs, your debts settled, and your soul prayed for through elaborate funeral rites. The way you died, in battle, from disease, or in your bed, would affect how you were remembered, and could impact your family's future prospects. Even in death, the politics didn't stop. The contrast between your luxurious existence and the grinding poverty of the peasantry would be stark. While you dined on exotic delicacies, your subjects might be reduced to eating bark and grass during times of famine. While you wore silk and velvet, they made do with rough wool and hemp. This inequality wasn't seen as unjust, but as the natural order ordained by God. It was a deeply ingrained system, and questioning it was, well, probably not a good idea for your longevity. Your legacy would be measured not just in terms of wealth and power accumulated, but in the stability and prosperity you brought to your lands and subjects. A good lord protected his people, ensured justice, and maintained the delicate balance of obligations that held medieval society together. It wasn't just about what you gained, but what you stewarded. As our journey through medieval nobility draws to a close, we return to the fundamental question: what would it truly mean to wake up as royalty in medieval times? The answer is complex and multifaceted. A life of unimaginable luxury shadowed by constant danger, unlimited power constrained by rigid obligations, and earthly glory haunted by the ever-present spectre of mortality. You would inhabit a world where your smallest decisions could affect the lives of thousands, where political missteps could mean death or exile, and where the weight of tradition and expectation would shape every aspect of your existence. Yet, you would also experience privileges and comforts that most people of that era could never imagine. Fine food, beautiful clothing, magnificent surroundings, and the power to shape the course of history itself. The medieval world would challenge every assumption you hold about power, privilege, and responsibility. It would force you to navigate a complex social landscape where honor mattered more than happiness, where loyalty was the highest virtue, and where your worth was measured not by personal achievement, but by your ability to fulfill the role that birth and circumstance had assigned to you. The moment you take your first steps through those marble corridors as a medieval monarch, you're not just walking through a palace, you're walking through a minefield of competing interests, ambitious nobles and foreign threats that would make modern politics look like a children's tea party. Every person who bows before you is simultaneously calculating how they might benefit from your favour, or, if necessary, your downfall. The ornate tapestries adorning your walls don't just depict heroic battles. They're essentially a visual reminder that your own story could end just as violently if you make the wrong political move. Your daily schedule wouldn't be filled with leisurely pursuits and royal banquets, though those certainly existed. Instead, you'd find yourself in an endless series of council meetings, diplomatic negotiations, and strategic planning sessions. The weight of the crown on your head would pale in comparison to the weight of responsibility pressing down on your shoulders. Every choice you made as a medieval ruler had the potential to spark wars, create famines, or establish peace that could last for generations. The feudal system that sustained your kingdom was built on a complex web of personal relationships and mutual obligations that you'd need to master if you hoped to survive more than a few months on the throne. Your nobles weren't just courtiers offering flattery. They were powerful landowners with their own armies, ambitions, and ideas about how the kingdom should be run. Each duke, earl, and baron who knelt before you commanded the loyalty of hundreds or thousands of knights and soldiers who might fight for you today, but could just as easily march against you tomorrow. The art of medieval diplomacy required you to be part chess master, part actor, and part fortune teller, constantly anticipating moves that were 3 steps ahead while maintaining the appearance of confident authority, even when you had no idea what you were doing. You'd need to reward loyalty without appearing weak, punish betrayal without seeming tyrannical, and balance competing interests without favouring any faction so much that the others felt compelled to unite against you. The slightest miscalculation could transform your most trusted advisor into your most dangerous enemy, because in a world where personal honour and family legacy meant everything, perceived slights could fester into blood feuds that lasted for generations. Managing your royal court would be like conducting an orchestra, where half the musicians were trying to play different songs while the other half were plotting to steal your baton. The elaborate ceremonies and formal protocols weren't just pageantry. They were carefully choreographed displays of power and hierarchy designed to reinforce your authority or expose its weaknesses. The overwhelming burden of decision-making would rest upon your shoulders. Every dawn brought with it a cascade of choices that could alter the fate of thousands. As you sat in your private chambers, breaking your fast on delicate manchet bread and spiced wine, your advisors would already be gathering, each bearing matters that demanded your immediate attention. The morning might begin with reports from your steward about the harvest yields across your vast estates. A poor crop in the northern counties could mean the difference between prosperity and famine for entire villages. Your treasurer would present detailed accounts of the royal coffers, explaining how the costs of maintaining your court, funding military campaigns, and supporting the church were stretching the kingdom's resources thin. The marshal of your household would seek approval for new fortifications along the border, where neighbouring lords had been making increasingly bold incursions into your territory. But these were merely the administrative concerns. The truly weighty matters would come later, presented by your most trusted counsellors in the privacy of your solar. A messenger might arrive bearing news that one of your most powerful vassals had died, leaving behind a young heir and a strategic castle that controlled a vital river crossing. The decision of who would serve as regent could shift the balance of power across 3 counties. A seemingly simple choice between 2 claimants might determine whether that region remained loyal to your crown or fell under the influence of a rival kingdom. Your spy master would whisper urgent intelligence about a brewing conspiracy among the merchant guilds in your largest city. They suspected that foreign gold was funding seditious activities, but moving against them too hastily could damage trade relationships that kept your treasury solvent. Wait too long, however, and you might face open rebellion in your own capital. The captain of your guard would request permission to investigate, but such an inquiry would require delicate handling to avoid appearing tyrannical to your other subjects. The weight of these decisions would press upon you like a physical force. Unlike common folk who answered only to their immediate lords, you bore responsibility for the welfare of everyone within your realm. A drought in the eastern provinces would require you to decide whether to open the royal granaries, potentially leaving your armies undersupplied if war came. A dispute between 2 powerful noble houses over mineral rights could escalate into private warfare that devastated the countryside if not handled with perfect diplomatic precision. Your education would have prepared you for this burden from childhood, but the reality would still be overwhelming. You would have learned statecraft from the finest tutors, studied the chronicles of successful rulers, and observed your predecessors navigating similar challenges. Yet theory and practice remained vastly different beasts. The consequences of your choices would ripple outward in ways impossible to fully predict, affecting lives you would never see and futures you could barely imagine. Religious obligations added another layer of complexity to your decision-making. The church expected your support in matters both spiritual and temporal, but their interests didn't always align with the practical needs of governing. When the bishop demanded that you fund a new cathedral, while your border fortresses crumbled from lack of maintenance, choosing between divine favour and earthly security required wisdom beyond your years. The threat of excommunication loomed over rulers who defied church authority too boldly, yet submitting entirely to clerical demands could leave your kingdom vulnerable to more secular threats. Your courtiers would watch your every decision with calculating eyes, each seeking to advance their own interests while maintaining the appearance of loyal service. The Lord Chancellor might advocate for one course of action while the Marshal favoured another, and determining whose counsel served the kingdom versus who served personal ambition became a constant mental exercise. Flattery would flow like wine at your table, but distinguishing genuine advice from self-interested manipulation required the wisdom of Solomon and the cunning of a serpent. Marriage negotiations presented perhaps the most consequential decisions of all. Your choice of spouse would determine not just your personal happiness, but the future of your entire dynasty. A marriage alliance with a neighbouring kingdom might secure peace for a generation, but it could also invite foreign influence into your court. Wedding a powerful noble from within your own realm might strengthen internal stability while limiting your options for international diplomacy. Even the timing of such unions carried enormous implications. Marry too young, and you might be manipulated by more experienced in-laws. Wait too long, and you risk dying without a clear heir. The pressure of producing legitimate heirs would weigh heavily upon you, particularly if you were a queen, pregnant in an age when female rule was viewed with suspicion. Every month that passed without pregnancy would fuel whispers about divine disfavour or questions about your fitness to rule. The health of your children would become matters of state, with physicians monitoring their every symptom and courtiers speculating about the succession with each childhood illness. Military decisions would demand perhaps the most immediate and consequential choices. When raiders crossed your borders, the speed and scale of your response would determine whether the threat remained a minor incursion or escalated into full-scale war. Mobilizing your armies required enormous expense and could disrupt the agricultural cycle if timed poorly, yet failing to respond decisively might be interpreted as weakness by other potential enemies. The lives of your soldiers would rest in your hands, and their families would hold you accountable for their safe return. The complex web of feudal obligations would create constant diplomatic challenges. When two of your vassals fell into dispute, your judgment would need to balance justice with political pragmatism. Favoring one might gain you a devoted ally, but could drive the other into the arms of your enemies. The intricate hierarchy of medieval society meant that even minor decisions about precedence and honor could have far-reaching consequences. Seating arrangements at state banquets, the order of speakers at court ceremonies, and the distribution of ceremonial offices all carried deep significance that could either strengthen or fracture the delicate bonds holding your realm together. Your relationship with neighboring rulers would require constant attention and delicate maneuvering. A casual remark to an ambassador might be interpreted as a threat or an opportunity for alliance. The exchange of gifts needed to demonstrate appropriate respect without appearing either weak or provocative. Royal marriages, trade agreements, and territorial disputes would all intersect in complex ways that demanded both strategic thinking and intuitive understanding of human nature. The administration of justice would place you in the position of ultimate arbiter for your realm's most serious crimes and disputes. Cases involving treason, murder, and conflicts between major noble houses would come before your throne, requiring you to weigh evidence, consider precedent, and render verdicts that balanced mercy with the need to maintain order. Your reputation for fairness would determine whether your subjects sought royal justice or tried to resolve their conflicts through private violence. Economic decisions would affect every level of society, from the grandest noble houses to the humblest peasant families. Decisions about taxation, trade regulations, and currency could stimulate prosperity or trigger recession. The temptation to solve immediate problems through heavy taxation would need to be balanced against the long-term health of your kingdom's economy. Devaluing your currency might provide short-term relief for royal debts, but could devastate the savings of your merchant class. The burden of these endless decisions would leave you longing for the simple certainties of common life. A peasant's choices were limited, but clear. Plant in spring, harvest in autumn, and trust in God's providence. Your choices were vast, but fraught with uncertainty, each decision branching into countless potential futures. The crown that adorned your head would feel heavier with each passing day, not from its physical weight, but from the accumulated pressure of ruling human lives and destinies. Yet perhaps the greatest challenge would be the isolation that came with supreme authority. While surrounded by courtiers and advisors, you would find genuine friendship nearly impossible to achieve. Those around you would always have agendas, ambitions, and interests that coloured their interactions with the crown. The simple pleasure of honest conversation would become a rare luxury, as even your closest companions would need to consider the political implications of every word they spoke in your presence. Sleep would bring little respite, as the weight of unresolved decisions and looming challenges would follow you into your dreams. You might find yourself lying awake in your luxurious bed, staring at the rich tapestries that decorated your chamber walls, wondering whether the choice you made about grain reserves would prevent famine, or whether the marriage alliance you negotiated would secure peace or invite invasion. The responsibilities of kingship would prove to be a burden that no amount of wealth or privilege could fully compensate. This, then, would be the true nature of your royal awakening, not merely a transformation from poverty to wealth, but from the simple struggles of survival to the complex burdens of leadership. The golden crown would prove to be both a symbol of ultimate privilege and the heaviest chain imaginable, binding you to duties and decisions that would shape the lives of countless souls across your medieval realm. In the end, awakening as medieval royalty would be both a blessing and a burden, offering unprecedented opportunities for luxury and influence, while demanding sacrifices and accepting responsibilities that would reshape your understanding of what it means to hold power over others. It would be a life lived in the full knowledge that much had been given to you, and from you much would be expected in return. As you drift off to sleep tonight in your comfortable modern bed, perhaps you'll dream of those distant castle chambers, imagining what it might have been like to wake up in a world so different from our own. A world where the weight of a crown brought both unimaginable privilege and the crushing responsibility of holding the fate of nations in your hands. What do you think? Is your modern life looking a little less stressful now? Or are you secretly wishing for a silk-draped, oak-carved bed? Hello there, fellow night owls, early birds, and anyone currently existing in that mysterious in-between time. Welcome to tonight's slightly less gentle waltz back in time. I'm so glad you've joined me for another journey into the past, where we'll be exploring the long, winding, and frankly, often bonkers path that led to the ultimate downfall of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known, the Roman Empire. Before we dive into the juicy details of imperial screw-ups and barbarian bashings, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, and, more importantly, what time of day it is for you right now. Are you snuggled up in bed, desperately trying to avoid doing laundry, or perhaps you're just looking for a bit of calm, or chaotic depending on my mood, relaxation during your waking hours? Either way, I'm honoured to be your slightly unhinged guide on this historical roller coaster. Feel free to drop a comment and let me know. If you enjoy immersive, mostly relaxing storytelling that combines fascinating history with my questionable comedic timing, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. We'll be exploring many more captivating tales from our shared past in future episodes, but for now, let's gently, or perhaps not so gently, turn our attention to ancient Rome. Close your eyes and imagine yourself transported back in time over 2,000 years ago. Picture the bustling streets of Rome at the height of its power and glory. The grand marble temples and monuments gleaming in the Mediterranean sun, probably blinding a few pigeons. The forum buzzing with the chatter of politicians, who were probably just gossiping, merchants trying to upsell you on a toga, and ordinary citizens going about their daily lives. Mighty legions, looking like they stepped straight out of a really expensive movie, marching out from the city gates, destined to expand the empire to the farthest corners of the known world. They were the original trendsetters in military might, with their highly disciplined formations and those snazzy red cloaks that just screamed, "We mean business, and we look good doing it." It must have seemed in those golden years that Rome would endure forever, that its wealth, its power, and its sheer, indomitable spirit could never be broken. Spoiler alert, they were wrong. Like that one friend who insists they can eat an entire pizza by themselves and then regrets it halfway through. Even the mightiest of empires can fall. And Rome, my friends, was no exception. This wasn't some sudden, dramatic implosion, like a poorly constructed building in a slapstick comedy. Oh no, Rome's decline was a slow-burn epic, a historical train wreck that took centuries to fully unfold. The story of Rome's downfall is a long and complex one, spanning centuries of wars, political intrigues, think Game of Thrones, but with more togas and less dragons, economic upheavals and seismic social and religious shifts. There was no single cause, no one fatal blow, but rather a slow unravelling, like a cheap sweater, as cracks formed in the very foundations of Roman power and prestige. It was a compounding series of bad decisions, unfortunate events, and emperors who probably shouldn't have been in charge of a lemonade stand, let alone a vast empire. Over the next few hours, don't worry, I'll try to keep you awake, we'll calmly meander through the winding history of Rome's decline, pausing to examine some of the key moments and figures that shaped its destiny. We'll meet emperors both wise and foolish, mostly foolish, let's be honest, generals both valiant and vainglory, the ones who got cool statues, and a vibrant cast of everyday Romans living through extraordinary and often inconvenient times. So, make yourself comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let the modern world and your overdue bills fade away as we embark on our journey back through the mists of time to explore the twilight years of the once indomitable Roman Empire, Our story begins in the closing years of the 2nd century AD. On the surface, the empire appeared to be at the peak of its strength and stability. The frontiers were secure, the economy was thriving, and a series of wise and capable rulers known as the 5 Good Emperors had ushered in an era of peace and prosperity. This period, from Nerva to Marcus Aurelius, was truly a golden age, a time when Rome actually seemed to have its act together. It was basically the Roman Empire's equivalent of a really good hair day, with everything falling perfectly into place. But beneath this veneer of invincibility, cracks were beginning to show in the foundations of Roman power. These hairline fractures would eventually spider and spread until the once solid bedrock of the empire crumbled away entirely, much like my self-control around a plate of cookies. The seeds of decline were sown subtly, often in the very successes that Rome enjoyed. Its vastness made it difficult to govern, its wealth attracted envious eyes, and its military prowess ironically made its leaders complacent. One of the earliest warning signs was a slow but steady erosion of the authority and competence of the imperial office itself. For generations, the empire had been guided by a succession of rulers who embodied the sober discipline and civic-minded virtue that had long been held up as quintessentially Roman ideals. Think Stoic philosophers, not TikTok influencers. They were men who understood the weight of their responsibilities, who prioritized the well-being of the state over their personal whims. But as the 2nd century drew to a close, a new breed of emperor began to ascend the throne. Men more interested in the trappings and pleasures of power than in the arduous work of governance. Basically, they were in it for the perks, not the paperwork. And boy, did those perks look good on Instagram, if they had it back then. One of the most notorious of these new rulers was Commodus, son and heir of the revered philosopher-king Marcus Aurelius. Commodus came to power in 177 AD at the tender age of just 19. Now, while his father had been a paragon of wisdom and duty, Commodus was a vain and capricious youth who cared more for the adulation of the mob than for the weighty responsibilities of empire. He literally fancied himself a gladiator, and would frequently descend into the arena to fight against terrified opponents who had been, instructed to submit to the emperor's blows. He was basically the Roman equivalent of a trust fund kid who thinks he's a professional athlete because he bought a fancy uniform. He even renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana, basically Commodusville, and even rechristened the months of the year after his own various titles and honorifics. Imagine having a month named Glorious Leader McCawsome Pants. Yeah, the Roman Senate, bless their hearts, probably just nodded nervously and hoped he'd eventually get bored and take up macrame. As Commodus indulged his whims and neglected the work of government, the once solid foundations of imperial authority began to crack and erode. The Senate, which had long served as a check on the excesses of emperors, found itself increasingly sidelined and ignored. Its members, once powerful voices in Roman politics, were reduced to little more than clapping seals, endorsing whatever bizarre decree their emperor dreamed up. The military, sensing the weakness at the heart of the empire, began to assert its own prerogatives. Soldiers, seeing their supreme commander prancing around in a lion's skin, probably started wondering if they were fighting for an empire or a circus. In 192 AD, after more than a decade of misrule, Commodus was finally assassinated in a palace coup. His death, however, did little to restore stability or integrity to the imperial office. If anything, it opened the floodgates for even more chaos. In the coming years, Rome would be racked by a series of short-lived, often violently deposed emperors as various factions within the military and the Senate vied for control. This wasn't just a revolving door, it was a spinning death trap of power grabs. This cycle of assassination and turnover reached a fever pitch with the rise of the Victorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard. Originally created to protect the emperor, from, bad breath or a stubbed toe, the Praetorians soon became a king-making force unto themselves, installing and removing rulers almost at will in exchange for bribes and political favours. It was basically a very deadly, very expensive game of musical thrones, where the loser often ended up with a dagger in their back. In the span of just 16 years, From 235 to 251 AD, no fewer than 20 emperors claimed the throne, many only for a matter of months before being dispatched by their own guards or by rival claimants. 20 emperors. That's more leadership changes than a particularly disorganized startup. The once inviolable dignity of the imperial office had been reduced to little more than a hollow crown to be bought, bartered, or seized by force. Imagine your boss being fired and replaced 20 times in 16 years. Your head would spin faster than a Roman chariot on a downhill slope, and you'd probably just give up trying to remember names. But the rot afflicting Rome in these years was not confined to the imperial palace alone. Even as the political foundations of the empire were fracturing, its economic underpinnings were beginning to crumble as well. For centuries, Rome's wealth and power had been sustained by a robust system of agriculture, trade, and tribute from conquered provinces. It was a well-oiled machine, bringing in resources from across the vast Mediterranean. But, as the 3rd century AD dawned, this once vibrant economy was showing signs of strain. In the countryside, centuries of intensive cultivation had begun to exhaust the fertility of the soil, leading to declining crop yields and the slow abandonment of once productive farms. It's hard to keep an empire fed when your topsoil is taking a permanent vacation. In the cities, the debasement of the silver currency by a succession of cash-strapped emperors led to rampant inflation and a loss of confidence in the money supply. Basically, your Roman dollar was worth less and less, making your daily bread suddenly cost a small fortune. Imagine trying to buy groceries with monopoly money. That's what it felt like for many Romans. And on the empire's frontiers, the unceasing pressure of hostile tribes and rival powers was forcing Rome to pour ever greater resources into maintaining its borders, resources that might otherwise have been invested in shoring up the economy at home. The military budget was eating everything, leaving little for roads, aqueducts, or, keeping the populace happy. These mounting economic woes only added to the sense of drift and decay that was gradually pervading every corner of Roman society. The grand facade of the empire might still have looked imposing from afar. The legions still marched, the monuments still gleamed, but up close the cracks in the foundation were becoming harder and harder to ignore. It was like putting a fresh coat of paint on a house that's about to collapse, all while the termites are having a field day in the basement. It would be a mistake, of course, to imagine that these cracks appeared all at once, or that their full implications were immediately apparent to those living through these troubled times. The decline of Rome was a slow and subtle process, unfolding across generations. Many Romans, no doubt, carried on with their daily lives much as they always had, tending to their trades and their families, celebrating festivals and mourning losses, largely insulated from the great currents of history shifting beneath their feet. They were probably more concerned with whether their local baker had fresh bread than with the subtle erosion of imperial authority. But with the benefit of hindsight, we can see the seeds of Rome's ultimate downfall being planted in these years of creeping dysfunction and doubt. The once unshakable edifice of Roman power was already growing brittle, even as the empire continued to expand its frontiers and assert its might on the world stage. In the coming hours, we'll see how these early fault lines would widen into yawning chasms as the Roman world was rocked by fresh waves of invasions, insurrections, and internecine strife. We'll meet the emperors and usurpers, saints and barbarians, who would shape Rome's destiny in its final centuries. But as we explore these turbulent times together, I invite you to hold in your mind the image of Rome at its height, the Rome of Augustus and Trajan, of Cicero and Virgil, the Rome that built roads and aqueducts that still endure to this day, that gave us systems of law and governance that still shape our world in profound and subtle ways. That Rome, the eternal city on the seven hills, the Caput Mundi, the centre of the world, can seem impossibly remote to us now, separated from our modern reality by an unfathomable gulf of years. But in the flickering light of our historical imagination, we can still catch glimpses of its faded glory. So, as we gently drift through these next chapters in Rome's long decline, let us pay our respects to the monumental achievement that was the Roman Empire, and to the fragile, fallible individuals who lived and struggled within its vast embrace, not so very different from you or me. With that in mind, let us slip softly into the rich and dreamlike realm of Rome's past, and immerse ourselves in the captivating story of its decline as the first cracks begin to spread through the mighty foundations of empire. I'll be right here, my voice a soothing, or perhaps sarcastically amused, constant, guiding you through the complex web of characters and events. There's no need to strain to remember every detail. Simply let the story wash over you and allow your mind to paint its own vivid pictures of this vanished world. And if at any time you feel your eyelids growing heavy, or your thoughts beginning to wander, know that it's all right to let yourself drift off into gentle sleep. The story will be here waiting for you when you return. So close your eyes now, take a slow, deep breath, and let the world of ancient Rome materialize around you. Picture the marble columns and triumphal arches, the golden eagles on scarlet standards snapping in the wind. Hear the distant tread of legionary boots, the laughter and chatter of the forum crowds, the metal-on-metal clang of gladiators sparring in the arena, hopefully not Commodus. And as the scene sets itself and the journey begins, know that you're in good company, for we are all, in our own way, heirs to the legacy of Rome, both its triumphs and its tragedies, its wisdom and its folly. In exploring this vanished empire's rise and fall, we are, in a sense, exploring the very roots of our own civilization, the deep and tangled taproot from which so much of our modern world has grown. It's a legacy that we carry with us, consciously or not, in the very language we speak, the laws we obey, the roads we travel, the stories we tell. A legacy so vast and so enduring that it can be difficult at times to perceive its full scope and grandeur. But tonight, as we embark together on this journey through Rome's fading twilight, we have a chance to step back and marvel at the sheer sweep and drama of this civilization's arc, to feel the weight and heft of all those centuries pressing down upon us, even as they lift us up on the wings of wonder. So let us begin, you and I, here at the hinge of Rome's fortunes, with the empire still clad in the raiment of its power, but with the first threads already beginning to fray. The journey will be long and winding, strewn with the wreckage of war and the glinting gold of glory. But I promise you, by the time we reach its end, we will have seen the soul of a civilization laid bare in all its splendor and all its sorrow. Content warning. This script contains a brief, non-graphic reference to violence. As the crisis of the 3rd century finally began to recede, and a battered Rome caught its breath under the reign of Diocletian, new threats loomed on the horizon. Diocletian, bless his organizational heart, tried to fix things by splitting the empire into two halves, east and west, thinking two emperors were better than one at managing this unruly beast. Spoiler alert, it mostly just meant twice the opportunities for sibling rivalry and civil war down the line. Still, for a brief period, he brought some much-needed stability. But Rome's sheer size and wealth had long attracted envious eyes from the tribes and confederations who lived in the lands beyond the Danube and Rhine. Groups like the Goths, Vandals, Saxons and Franks had clashed with Rome for centuries. Roman armies would frequently cross the frontier to pacify and subjugate these so-called barbarians, either incorporating them into the empire or using them as a buffer against even more distant foes. But now the tables were starting to turn. The barbarians weren't just a nuisance, they were becoming a legitimate threat, like a really persistent doorstep salesman who eventually just walks into your house. As we've seen, the upheavals of the 3rd century had left the Roman military severely weakened and depleted. Legions that had once seemed invincible now struggled to repel increasingly bold raids and incursions by Germanic warriors. Slowly but surely the military balance of power was shifting. Barbarian warbands were evolving into powerful tribal kingdoms with sophisticated political structures and capable leaders. They looked upon Rome's weakening grip on its frontier provinces and sensed an opportunity. It was like seeing a going-out-of-business sale at your favourite rival store. But instead of half-off togas, it was entire provinces. As the 4th century AD dawned, one tribe in particular would emerge as the Romans' most formidable adversary, the Goths. They were an East Germanic people who had migrated from southern Scandinavia to the region north of the Black Sea in the early 1st millennium AD. For nearly a century, the Goths had been a familiar presence along the lower Danube, sometimes fighting the Romans as enemies, other times serving the emperors as allies. They were like that frenemy you just can't quit. In the early 300s, the Goths divided into two distinct branches, the Visigoths in the west and Ostrogoths in the east. Their rise to power would be spurred by a looming menace from the steppes of Central Asia, the Huns. The Huns were a nomadic people whose origins and ethnic makeup are still clouded in mystery. What's clear is that their westward push in the late 300s set off a chain reaction that would shake an already wobbly Roman world to its core. Think of it as a historical domino effect, where each falling tribe pushed another until the biggest domino of all, Rome, was in the crosshairs. Fleeing the Hunnic advance, the Visigoths sought permission to cross the Danube frontier and settle inside the empire. In a decision that would have momentous consequences, the Emperor Valens agreed, allowing the tribe to establish itself in the Balkans in 376. It was a move born of expediency, not friendship. Valens hoped the Goths could serve as a first line of defence against the Huns, while also providing a handy pool of recruits for the perennially short-handed legions. Think of it as Rome trying to get a 2-for-1 deal on defence and labour, but forgetting to read the fine print. But any illusions of an easy alliance were swiftly shattered. Once across the river, the Goths were subjected to brutal mistreatment by the local Roman authorities. Corrupt officials exploited them, charging exorbitant prices for food and even selling their children into slavery. This was less welcome wagon and more highway robbery. Desperate for food and angered by their shabby welcome, the tribe rose in rebellion. In 378, the crisis came to a head at the fateful Battle of Adrianople. Leading a massive army, Emperor Valens confidently marched out to crush the Gothic upstarts. But in the parched plains near the city, the Romans blundered into a catastrophic defeat. Trapped and surrounded by the Gothic cavalry, the imperial army was massacred. Valens himself was killed in the slaughter, becoming the first emperor to fall in battle against a barbarian foe. It was like the ultimate hold my beer moment gone horribly wrong, leaving the Eastern Roman Empire in utter disarray. The shock waves from Adrianople reverberated across the empire. The Eastern Roman army had been gutted, leaving the Goths free to roam and plunder the Balkan provinces at will. It was a grim sign of things to come. More tribes now rushed to exploit Rome's vulnerability. On the last day of 406, a massive force of Alans, Vandals, and Suebi poured across the Rhine, overwhelming the Roman defences like a great wave. This wasn't just a border skirmish. It was a complete and utter collapse of the frontier. The Germanic invaders now crashed over Gaul, Hispania, and other once secure provinces. The unthinkable suddenly seemed possible. After centuries of keeping the barbarians at bay, the frontiers had completely collapsed. Lands that had been Roman for 500 years or more now fell under the sway of Germanic kings and warlords. The Goths, meanwhile, went from triumph to triumph. After years of drifting across the Balkan provinces, they were now led by a capable young king named Alaric, a shrewd tactician with Roman military training. Alaric dreamed of winning a permanent homeland for his people. In 408, the Visigoths invaded Italy itself, the sacred heart of the empire. After 2 grueling sieges, Alaric's army stood at the gates of Rome. The Senate, which had once commanded kings and decided the fates of nations, was reduced to sending a pathetic plea for mercy. The mighty city would be spared, the envoys promised, if Alaric would accept their pitiful bribe of gold, silver, silk, scarlet cloth, and pepper. According to the historian Zosimus, Alaric roared with laughter at this offer, quipping, "The thicker the hay, the easier it is mowed." He demanded a far greater ransom, and the Romans had no choice but to pay. It was basically the world's most expensive protection racket, and Rome was paying dearly for its past glories. But it was only a temporary reprieve. In 410, the Visigoths returned. This time the gates were flung open by rebellious slaves, and Rome fell to its attackers. Alaric's army poured into the capital, burning and looting as they went. For the first time in nearly 800 years, Rome had been conquered by a foreign enemy. The shock was profound, prompting much anguished reflection among the empire's elites. "It is my prayer, dearest son," wrote St. Jerome in the aftermath, "that you may live among these things as a pilgrim, a sojourner, a citizen of Jerusalem, not of Babylon. Our tears are dried by the thought that God has spared us to warn others." Though the city itself still stood, the fall of Rome marked a crucial turning point. In a world where civilizations were thought to rise and fall according to the whims of the gods, it was seen by many as a sign of divine abandonment, a punishment for the empire's sins. The Visigothic sack was far from the last indignity the beleaguered Romans would face. In 429, the Vandals, under their king Genseric, invaded North Africa, wrenching the Diocese of Africa from imperial control. It was a devastating strategic loss. North Africa, with its rich agricultural lands, had long been the breadbasket of the Western Empire. Its vital grain shipments fed the swelling populace of Rome and other cities. With that province gone, the imperial heartland faced crippling food shortages. Imagine your main grocery supplier suddenly deciding they're going rogue. The loss of Africa also meant the loss of the lucrative taxes and revenues that had flowed from the region into the imperial treasury. Already reeling from the depredations of the invaders, Rome's economy entered freefall. With its finances in ruins, fields gone, and borders under siege, the Western Empire's position grew increasingly untenable. The Vandals' conquest of Carthage in 439 marked the de facto end of Roman rule in North Africa. Its shattered remnants would limp on for 3 decades more, but the West was now careening toward oblivion. As the 5th century AD reached its midpoint, the Western throne had become a grim game of musical chairs. A rapid succession of emperors tried and failed to stem the empire's bleeding. Most reigned for only a few years, if that, constantly looking over their shoulders for the next ambitious general or barbarian warlord. In 475, a general named Orestes seized control of the court at Ravenna and named his young son, Romulus, as emperor. The child ruler would be mockingly dubbed Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus. In a twist of historical irony, the last emperor of Rome bore the names of both the city's mythical founder and the man who had inaugurated the imperial age. Little did young Romulus know that he would also be the one to close that chapter. His reign would be brief, more of a poignant footnote than a real attempt to resurrect Western imperial glory. He was essentially a historical cameo, appearing just long enough for the final credits to roll. In 476, Orestes refused demands from his barbarian mercenaries for land in Italy. Their response was swift and decisive. The Germanic general Odoacer defeated and killed Orestes in battle, then marched on Ravenna. There they found the teenage Emperor Romulus trembling in his palace. In a final indignity, Odoacer stripped the imperial insignia from the boy ruler and bundled him off to a comfortable exile in Campania. The Western Roman Empire had breathed its last. Apparently, even conquerors have a soft spot for kids. Or maybe he just thought, why bother with this kid? He's clearly not cut out for this. With that anticlimactic act, the long, turbulent history of the Western Roman Empire shuddered to a halt. Odoacer now proclaimed himself King of Italy, ruling the peninsula on behalf of his patron, the Eastern Emperor Zeno. Of course, the story of Rome was far from over. The Eastern Empire, increasingly regarded as the Byzantine Empire, would endure for nearly 1,000 years more until falling to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, and the ideal of a universal European empire, inaugurated by Augustus so many centuries before, would continue to transfix kings and conquerors for generations to come. But the dream of a unified Roman Empire, a single state encompassing the full scope of the Mediterranean world, had perished. Rome, the eternal city on the 7 hills, would pass into the realm of wistful legend, a hazy memory of past glories, forever pined after, but never again attained. And so, in this quiet hour, we ponder the long and winding path that led the Romans to their final destination. In telling the tale of their decline and fall, what lessons might we discern for our own civilization? Perhaps above all, Rome offers a cautionary tale about the dangers of imperial hubris. At the height of its power, Rome's dominion had seemed eternal and unshakable. The empire's sheer size and scope allowed its rulers to grow complacent, blind to the cracks emerging in the very foundations of their society. They failed to reckon with the tectonic forces that gnawed at the roots of Roman power, the crisis of legitimacy that ate away at the imperial office, the widening gulf between rich and poor, the slow rot of civic virtue and martial prowess. They thought their system was foolproof, but history has always proved them wrong. In their arrogance, they assumed that the barbarian tribes would always remain quarrelsome inferiors, awed by the splendor of Rome and content with their place in its shadow. They failed to imagine that the societies on their periphery might one day eclipse them in strength and supplant them as masters of the world. For centuries, Rome thrived on relentless conquest and expansion, always seeking to push its frontiers further out. But in time, that sprawling frontier became a source of weakness, not strength, an impossible expanse to patrol and defend. It was like endlessly adding rooms to a house without bothering to reinforce the foundation. And yet, even as Rome receded from history's main stage, its legacy would endure. It lived on in the splendor of Constantinople, in the soaring architecture of medieval cathedrals, in the Latin that would remain Europe's lingua franca of learning and statecraft. It shaped the art, philosophy, and institutions that would form the bedrock of Western civilization. The heirs of Rome may have turned to new gods and spoken new tongues, but they continued to draw guidance and inspiration from the old empire's faded triumphs. Even the Renaissance, that great reawakening of art and knowledge, saw itself as the rebirth of a classical ideal that had never truly perished. Rome's influence wasn't just a footnote, it was the entire prologue for much of European history. So rest now, dear friends, and ponder the long, completed journey of a civilization that once seemed eternal. In the morning's light, its monuments will still stand in mute testament to the heights that humanity can ascend, and its cracked and weathered ruins will whisper of the dangers of taking such glories for granted, and the ephemeral nature of even the mightiest works of mortal hands. The Goths had delivered a crippling blow at Adrianople, but they were just one of many tribes massing along Rome's borders. The Vandals, Saxons, and Franks, names that would soon be seared into the Roman psyche and possibly give Roman parents nightmares, were also growing restless, probing for weaknesses in the empire's defences. These Germanic tribes had long been thorns in Rome's side. For centuries the Romans had tried to pacify them with a carrot-and-stick approach, sometimes trading with them, other times fighting to push them back beyond the Rhine and Danube rivers. But like a rising tide, the pressure from these tribes kept building, and the overstretched Roman legions simply couldn't be everywhere at once. It was like trying to plug 100 leaks with only 10 fingers, while simultaneously trying to herd cats. It didn't help matters that Rome was distracted by threats on other fronts. In the east, the Persian-Sasanian Empire remained a constant adversary, forcing Rome to split its military might. The Sasanians were no pushovers. They were a formidable empire in their own right, constantly vying for control of the lucrative trade routes and border territories. This meant Rome couldn't just focus on its European frontiers. It had a powerful rival snapping at its heels in the Middle East. And in the late 300s AD, a fierce new power burst onto the scene from the steppes of Central Asia. The Huns. These fearsome nomadic warriors, known for their superb horsemanship and deadly accuracy with the composite bow, began pushing westward, displacing other tribes in their wake. The Huns didn't directly attack Rome at first, but their migrations set off a domino effect, forcing more and more Germanic peoples up against Rome's borders. The rising pressure finally burst the dam in 406 AD. That bitterly cold winter, the Rhine River froze over, and when spring came, the ice breakup destroyed Roman fortifications along the riverbank. Tens of thousands of Germanic tribesmen, Vandals, Alans, and Suebi, poured across the Rhine en masse, fanning out across the Roman province of Gaul. This wasn't just a border skirmish. It was a complete and utter collapse of the frontier, a permanent breach in the Roman defences. the Germanic invaders now crashed over Gaul, Hispania, and other once secure provinces. The unthinkable suddenly seemed possible. After centuries of keeping the barbarians at bay, the frontiers had completely collapsed. Lands that had been Roman for 500 years or more now fell under the sway of Germanic kings and warlords. The writing was on the wall, carved in very large, very angry letters. More dominoes soon fell. In 410, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by their cunning King Alaric, laid siege to Rome itself. For the first time in nearly 800 years, barbarians breached the walls of the mighty capital. The sack of Rome sent shockwaves through the empire and marked a grim psychological turning point. If Rome wasn't safe, nowhere was. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a spiritual wound, a blow to the very idea of Rome's invincibility. But the eternal city's humiliation was just beginning. In 455, the Vandals, who had carved out a kingdom in North Africa, came calling. Led by their fearsome king Genseric, the Vandals stormed ashore at Ostia and spent 2 weeks methodically stripping Rome of its riches. Priceless jewels, gold and silver plate, even the gilded bronze tiles from the Temple of Jupiter, all of it was carted away to adorn Genseric's palaces in Carthage. The term vandalism stems from the memory of their pitiless plundering. So, next time you see a graffiti tag, remember you're witnessing a small tribute to Genseric's legacy, just with less gold and fewer temples involved. The Vandals' conquest of North Africa was especially devastating to the Western Empire. For centuries, the fertile plains of modern-day Tunisia and Algeria had served as the breadbasket for Rome's teeming masses. The region supplied vital grain shipments that kept the capital fed and content. With that territory lost and the shipping lanes under Vandal control, Rome struggled to fill its granaries. Hunger joined fear as the constant companions of the once proud Romans. It's hard to maintain an empire when your citizens are grumbling about empty stomachs. Beset by external invasions and internal chaos, Rome's authority crumbled in a piecemeal fashion. Gaul was divided between the Franks, Burgundians, and Visigoths. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes carved up Britain. The Vandals ruled North Africa. The Western emperors clung to Italy, but their position grew ever more precarious. The loss of so much territory meant a steep decline in revenue from taxes, money the empire desperately needed to pay its soldiers and fund its operations. In an effort to make ends meet, Roman mints debased the currency, cutting the silver content of coins. But this only triggered crippling inflation, further eroding public confidence. With its economy in shambles, borders overrun, and the mirage of invincibility irreparably shattered, the Western Roman Empire was a hollowed-out husk of its former self. By the late 400s AD, all it would take was one final gust of wind to topple this creaking relic. And that breeze was already blowing in from the east, ruffling the golden banners of the Huns as their most famous leader set his sights on Rome. His name still evokes dread even today, Attila, the Scourge of God. Born into a ruling clan of the Huns, Attila rose to power in the early 400s alongside his brother, Bleda. For a time, the siblings shared the kingship, extracting a fortune in tribute from a weakened Eastern Roman Empire. But Attila wasn't content to share power or wealth. In 445, he murdered his brother and assumed sole command of the Hunnic war machine. This guy clearly didn't believe in power sharing. Now the undisputed lord of the steppes, Attila launched a series of blistering raids and conquests that pushed the boundaries of his empire from the Caspian Sea all the way to the Rhine. A skilled commander and a master of psychological warfare, Attila used terror as a weapon. The speed and savagery of his attacks left a trail of dread in his wake. Where Attila has passed, it was said, the grass never grows again. Which, honestly, is a pretty good marketing slogan for a conqueror, albeit a terrifying one. In 452, this horde of nomadic cavalry, maybe 500,000 strong, rolled across the Alps and poured into Italy on a collision course with Rome. As Attila laid waste to the Po Valley, the Western Emperor Valentinian III could only watch helplessly from his refuge in Ravenna. With his Vandal foes controlling the seas and his borders stripped of legions, Valentinian was powerless to stop the Huns' advance. But fate intervened at the gates of Rome. According to legend, Pope Leo I himself met Attila and persuaded him to spare the city. The more likely reason for Attila's retreat was an outbreak of disease within his army and trouble stirring on his eastern frontiers. Whatever the cause, the Huns withdrew, but not before Attila extracted a promise of marriage to Valentinian's sister, Honoria, and a hefty dowry. It seems the mighty Roman emperor had been reduced to paying off a barbarian king. Awkward family dinner, anyone? So, Honoria, how's that marriage to the guy who almost sacked Rome working out? Attila didn't have long to savour his triumph. In 453, shortly after adding another young bride to his harem, the Hunnic ruler suffered a fatal nosebleed on his wedding night. He choked to death in a stupor, an ignoble end for a man who had been the terror of empires. With Attila's death, the Hunnic threat quickly receded. His sons squabbled over the succession, and the Huns' vassals asserted their independence, splintering the tribal confederation. But by this point, the damage to Rome was already done. The Western Empire was a rump state, its emperor a figurehead, its once proud army a patchwork of barbarian mercenaries. The last emperor to rule the West, fittingly enough, was named Romulus Augustulus, echoing both the founder of Rome and the first Roman emperor. But the similarities ended there. Romulus Augustulus was little more than a puppet ruler, a pawn in the power struggles of barbarian warlords. His father, Orestes, a former secretary to Attila, had seized control of the imperial government in 475 AD. To appease his barbarian troops, Orestes promised them land grants in Italy. But the Western Empire had precious little land left to give. It was like offering a slice of a pizza that's already mostly eaten. When Orestes reneged on his pledge, the simmering anger boiled over into open revolt. The Germanic mercenaries rallied behind one of their own, a chieftain named Odoacer. In 476, Odoacer's forces captured and executed Orestes, then marched on Ravenna. There, they found the teenage Emperor Romulus trembling in his palace. In a final indignity, Odoacer stripped the imperial insignia from the boy ruler and bundled him off to a comfortable exile in Campania. The Western Roman Empire had breathed its last. Apparently even conquerors have a soft spot for kids. Or maybe he just thought, why bother with this kid? He's clearly not cut out for this. A nice villa in Campania sounds much more his speed. The fall sent shockwaves across the Mediterranean world. The Eastern Roman Empire, the half of the empire that had long looked down on their Latin cousins, now stood alone against the tide of history. In a symbolic move, the Eastern Emperor Zeno abolished the title of Western Emperor, proclaiming himself sole ruler of a united Roman world, even as that world crumbled around him. He was effectively saying, "Look, I'll take all the credit, even for the part that just fell apart." Yet, in a strange twist, even the barbarians who had brought down the Western Empire seemed to respect the majesty of Rome. Many of them continued to mint coins bearing the emperor's likenesses and rule in the emperor's names, even if that rule was but a pale shadow of imperial glory. The light of Rome, it seemed, could not be fully extinguished. The empire left a deep and lasting imprint on the European mind. Its language, Latin, remained the tongue of learning and liturgy for centuries. Its legal code laid the foundation for civil law across the continent. Its literature, philosophy, and art set standards that endured for a millennium and more. Even the city of Rome itself, ravaged and depopulated, cloaked itself in the mystique of past glory, becoming a ghostly reminder of a bygone era. As Europe descended into the Dark Ages, scholars and chroniclers looked back with awe and longing at the vanished splendor of the eternal city. In time, a Western Roman emperor would arise again, this time wearing the crown of a Germanic monarchy that traced its roots to the conquests of Charlemagne. The Holy Roman Empire, as it came to be known, was a conscious attempt to resurrect the glories of Rome, even if it was, as Voltaire quipped, neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. For 1,000 years and more, Rome's shadow stretched long across the west, even as the east carried the torch in the form of the Byzantine Empire, centered on Constantine's glittering capital of Constantinople. The Byzantines, who defiantly called themselves Romans, preserved the art, literature and statecraft of Greco-Roman civilization for centuries, clinging to their Roman identity with fierce pride. They were the ultimate Roman superfans, keeping the flame alive long after the western half had flickered out. So, there you have it, folks, the long, glorious and ultimately hilarious story of how Rome managed to trip over its own 2 feet. What was your favourite moment of imperial absurdity? Let me know in the comments. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through time. As you settle in for a restful slumber, perhaps winding down after a busy day, allow yourself to be transported to a world far different from our own, Victorian England. Before we embark on this adventure, I invite you to pause for a moment and share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It's a wonder of our modern age that we can connect across vast distances and time zones, all while exploring the past together. And if you find yourself enjoying these calm historical meanderings, I encourage you to subscribe so you can drift off to sleep with a bit of boring, but surprisingly entertaining history whenever the mood strikes. But for now, let us leave the present behind and allow ourselves to slip into a very different time and place. Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something that'll make you super grateful for that hot shower you took today. We're diving into Victorian hygiene, and trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. Think fancy dresses and top hats? Yeah, well, let's just say what was happening underneath those beautiful clothes was not so beautiful. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to 1850-something London, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. So, congratulations, you just woke up in Victorian London. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you smell. That thick, heavy, almost chewy air that seems to stick in your throat. It's like, well, imagine if someone took every smell you've ever tried to avoid and mixed them all together in a big steaming pot. Human waste, rotting garbage, smoke from thousands of coal fires, and something else. Something sweet and sick and wrong that you can't quite place. You shift slightly in your bed, whatever bed you're lucky enough to have, and immediately feel how different everything is. The sheets, if you have sheets, feel rough against your skin, scratchy, nothing like the soft cotton you're used to. And they smell, well, let's just say fabric softener won't be invented for another century or so. Good news, you're alive. Bad news, well, basically everything else. Let's start with where you are. If you're poor, which most people were, you're probably sharing a room with, maybe 6 or 8 other people. Could be your family, could be strangers. Doesn't really matter, because privacy is pretty much a luxury only rich folks can afford. The room is maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. That's it. And everyone's just there, breathing each other's air, sharing each other's, well, everything. The walls are damp, always damp. There's this weird green stuff growing in the corners that nobody talks about, but everybody pretends not to see. Your breathing naturally slows in and out as you take in this strange, smelly new world. If you're middle class, and lucky you if you are, things are better. You might have your own bedroom, maybe even your own bed. But better is relative. Your house still doesn't have running water, still doesn't have electricity, and that bathroom you're thinking about, yeah, that's not really a thing yet. The Great Victorian Cleanliness Conspiracy. Now here's where it gets interesting. Everyone in this era thinks they're clean, like genuinely believes they're maintaining good hygiene. It's just that their definition of clean is, well, let's call it different. Take bathing, for example. You know, that daily shower you took, that long, hot, relaxing wash where you shampooed your hair and scrubbed every inch of your body. Forget it. Not happening. In fact, if you suggested taking a full bath every day, people would think you were genuinely insane. A comfortable sigh escapes because even thinking about their bathing schedule makes you appreciate that warm shower even more. See, Victorians believed that bathing too much was actually dangerous, like medically harmful. They thought all that water would weaken your constitution, make you sick, maybe even kill you. So most people, they'd take a full bath maybe once a week if they were fancy. If they were poor, maybe once a month, maybe. But here's the thing, they weren't just sitting around dirty. They had this whole system worked out. It was called a sponge bath, and basically you'd wash the important bits, face, hands, armpits, and the naughty bits. That was it. Everything else? Well, everything else could wait until bath day. Picture this. You're standing in your bedroom, because that's where most people washed, next to a little wooden stand with a bowl and a pitcher of cold water. Cold because hot water on demand. That's basically magic at this point. You pour the water into the bowl, grab a cloth or a sponge, and you just spot clean. Like you're detailing a car, but the car is your body and the detailing is minimal. Your shoulders drop, releasing some of that tension as you imagine how different their mornings must have been. The wealthy folks, they had it a bit better. Some of them had these fancy copper bathtubs that servants would fill with hot water carried up from the kitchen. But even they weren't bathing daily. Maybe twice a week if they were real hygiene enthusiasts. And get this, multiple people would often use the same bath water. Dad goes first, then Mum, then the kids in order of age. By the time little Billy gets his turn, that water is, well, let's just say it's more like soup than water. Teaching people how to take a bath, can you imagine? Bath for dummies, but in 1858. These books had rules because apparently that could kill you. Don't wash your face when travelling unless you can purify the water with alcohol or ammonia first. Or take Russian baths, where you wash your face with extremely hot water, then extremely cold water to prevent wrinkles. Getting more comfortable now, settling deeper into your bed, and honestly, their bathing advice sounds exhausting. The unbearable lightness of being stinky. Now let's talk about teeth. Oh boy, let's talk about teeth. Toothbrushes existed, but they were expensive and, how do I put this, not great. They had wooden handles and bristles that were basically just really stiff animal hair. Like, imagine brushing your teeth with a tiny scrub brush, one that costs about as much as you'd spend on groceries for a week. So, what did poor people do? Well, they got creative. Some people used celery, just chewed on celery and hoped for the best. Others made their own toothpaste out of chalk, soot, or powdered cuttlefish bone. Yeah, cuttlefish bone in your mouth. On purpose. And if you had a toothache, well, good luck with that. Most places didn't have dentists. Instead, you'd go to your local barber or blacksmith. The same guy who cuts hair and shoes horses is now going to poke around in your mouth with whatever tools he's got handy. No anesthesia, no proper training, just hope for the best and try not to scream too loud. A yawn escapes and you're suddenly very grateful for modern dentistry. Hair washing was its own adventure. Remember, no shampoo. So what did people use? Well, eggs. Women would crack eggs over their heads and work the yolks into their hair like they were making breakfast on their scalp. Then they'd rinse it out with pitchers of water. The smell must have been interesting. Other popular options included vinegar mixed with water, black tea, rum or rosemary. Basically, if it was in the kitchen and liquid, someone probably tried washing their hair with it. The wealthy had access to fancier concoctions, but even they were basically making their own shampoo out of whatever was lying around. And here's the kicker. They only washed their hair maybe once a month. Maybe. Women's hair was considered their crowning glory, so they'd pile it up in elaborate styles and leave it that way for weeks. They'd add oils and pomades to keep it healthy, but, well, those oils would go rancid after a while. So their beautiful hair would smell like rancid fat. Lovely. You shift slightly, finding a more comfortable position as you think about how different their daily routines must have been. Laundry day, a humiliation marathon. Laundry was a whole other nightmare. No washing machines, obviously. Everything had to be done by hand. And soap was expensive, so people got creative. Oil stains were treated with chalk. Blood and grass stains were removed with kerosene. Other odours were fought with milk. And, for bleaching, well, they'd soak their clothes in urine. Human urine. Because urine contains ammonia, which is actually a pretty good cleaning agent. But still, urine. The whole process took forever. You'd haul water, heat it up, scrub everything by hand, rinse it, and then hang it to dry. A full wash day could take all day. Literally all day. So most people only did laundry once a week if they were lucky. Some people went longer, which means, well, people wore the same clothes for days at a time, sometimes weeks. That beautiful Victorian outfit you're picturing, it probably hadn't been washed in a while. Nice and easy, just breathing and thinking about how much effort it took just to stay basically clean. Let's talk about underwear, or well, the lack thereof. Most poor people didn't wear underwear at all. None. The wealthy might have linen undergarments, but even those weren't changed very often. And women's clothing. Oh boy, layers and layers of heavy fabric. Corsets that hadn't been washed in months. Petticoats that, let's not even think about petticoats. All of this clothing would absorb sweat, body odour, food smells, smoke from fires, everything. And it would just stay there, trapped in the fabric, until the next wash day, which, remember, might not be for weeks. So picture walking down a London street in the summer. Hundreds of people, all wearing heavy, unwashed clothing, all smelling like, well, themselves. Plus whatever they'd eaten for breakfast, plus smoke from coal fires, plus horse manure from the streets, plus, well, you get me. You get the idea. The smell would be intense, like a physical presence following you around, something you could taste in the air. Your breathing naturally slows, settling deeper into this strange world where staying clean was a daily struggle nobody really won. London, the great stink and its unexpected hero. And that was just personal hygiene. We haven't even talked about the streets yet. Oh, the streets. London in the 1850s was home to about 2 million people. That's a lot of people making a lot of mess. And there was no organised garbage collection, no street cleaning. People just threw their garbage out the window into the street, where it would sit and rot and attract rats. Human waste was, well, that's a whole other story. Most houses didn't have toilets. Instead, people used chamber pots. Basically, you'd do your business in a pot under your bed, and then, well, someone had to empty it. Usually into the street, or into a shared privy in the backyard, or, if you were really lazy, just out the window. There were people called night soil men who would come around and empty the cesspools and privies, but they only worked at night because the job was considered too disgusting for daylight hours. And where did all that waste go? Well, mostly into the Thames, London's main river. The same river people got their drinking water from, yeah. Think about that for a minute. You settle deeper into your bed, muscles relaxing as you try to imagine living in a world where the river you drink from is also the place everyone dumps their sewage. The horses made it worse. London ran on horsepower. Thousands and thousands of horses pulling carriages, delivery wagons, omnibuses. And horses? Well, horses poop a lot. It was estimated that a single horse produced about 35 pounds of manure per day. Multiply that by thousands of horses, and, well, you do the math. All of this waste would pile up in the streets. When it rained, it would wash around, creating these, let's call them, rivers of nastiness. When it was dry, it would bake in the sun and create clouds of dust. Dust that was, well, let's just say you didn't want to breathe it. And yet people did breathe it, every day. They walked through it. They lived with it. They thought it was normal. Because, well, when everyone smells the same and everyone's environment is gross, gross becomes normal. That's it, getting more comfortable, your muscles melting into the mattress as you think about how lucky you are to live in a time with soap and running water and actual garbage collection. The thing is, Victorians weren't stupid. They knew things were unpleasant. They just didn't really understand why people kept getting sick. They had this theory called miasma theory that basically said diseases were caused by bad air, bad smells. They thought if you could smell something foul, it could make you sick, which, I mean, they weren't completely wrong. Bad smells usually meant bad sanitation, and bad sanitation definitely led to disease, but they thought the smell itself was the problem, not the underlying conditions causing the smell. So their solution was perfume. Lots and lots of perfume. Instead of fixing the source of the smell, they just tried to cover it up. Rich people would douse themselves in expensive fragrances. Poor people would use whatever they could find, maybe some cheap cologne, or flowers, or herbs. But here's the thing about trying to cover up the smell of unwashed bodies, unwashed clothes, and sewage-filled streets with perfume. It doesn't really work. It just creates this weird, sickly sweet combination that's somehow worse than the original smell. Imagine vanilla air freshener mixed with, well, a porta potty. That's basically what wealthy Victorians smelled like. A comfortable sigh escapes, and you're so grateful for modern understanding of hygiene and disease. Beauty, brains, and accidental poison. Women had it particularly rough. Their clothing was even more complicated than men's. Layers and layers of heavy fabric, corsets that made breathing difficult, long skirts that dragged on the ground, picking up everything, and they were expected to look perfect at all times. Makeup existed, but it was dangerous. Face powder often contained lead. Rouge contained mercury. And since people didn't understand what these chemicals could do to the human body, well, many Victorian women were literally poisoning themselves in the name of beauty. Hair dye was even worse. There was this popular product called Hall's Hair Renewer that promised to hide grey hair and restore youthful colour. The secret ingredient? Lead. People were rubbing lead directly into their scalps, wondering why they felt sick all the time. Your shoulders drop, releasing that tension as you think about how much we've learned about chemistry and safety. And then there were the beauty routines. Without modern skincare, people came up with interesting solutions. They'd use lemon juice to lighten freckles, butter to moisturize dry skin, raw meat as face masks. They'd sleep with slices of raw beef on their faces, thinking it would keep them looking young. The smell in a Victorian bedroom, especially a wealthy Victorian bedroom with all these beauty treatments, must have been complex. Raw meat, lead-based cosmetics, unwashed hair with rancid pomade, and whatever perfume they were using to try to cover it all up. But, you know what? They made do. They adapted. They found ways to feel clean and attractive within the constraints of their world. It's actually kind of impressive when you think about it. They were working with what they had, doing their best with the knowledge available to them. Getting cozy now, really settling in, and there's something almost admirable about their resourcefulness, even if their methods were questionable. The wealthy had servants to help with the worst of it, maids to empty chamber pots, laundresses to deal with the clothes, bath attendants to heat and carry water. But the servants themselves, well, they were often even dirtier than their employers. They couldn't afford to take time for personal hygiene when they were busy maintaining everyone else's. Poor people just did their best, shared resources, helped each other out, and accepted that being clean was a luxury they couldn't afford. They focused on survival, on finding enough food to eat, enough work to pay rent, enough coal to keep warm. Hygiene was something you worried about when you had everything else figured out. And in 1850-something London, most people definitely did not have everything else figured out. Nice and easy, breathing deeply as you imagine trying to navigate daily life in a world where everything was harder. Where taking a bath was an event that required planning. Where brushing your teeth was a luxury. Where staying clean was a constant battle against a dirty world. The Great Stink of 1858, a parliamentarian's nightmare. The funny thing is, they probably would have looked at our modern obsession with cleanliness and thought we were crazy. Daily showers, changing clothes every day, washing our hands multiple times a day. They would have worried we were washing away our natural defences, making ourselves weak and susceptible to disease. Different times, different knowledge, different priorities. But underneath all the dirt and smell and questionable hygiene practices, these were still people, still families, trying to make the best life they could for themselves and their children. They fell in love, told jokes, worried about money, celebrated birthdays. They had hopes and dreams and fears, just like anyone else. They just smelled a lot worse while doing it. Settling deeper, that heavy, comfortable feeling spreading through your body as the strange world of Victorian London starts to feel a little more real, a little more human, despite all its challenges and unpleasant realities. But let's talk about something that'll really make you appreciate modern plumbing, Victorian toilets, or, well, the lack thereof. You know that bathroom down the hall, the one with running water and toilet paper and a seat that's actually comfortable? Yeah, forget about it. Most Victorians had never seen anything like that. Instead, they had alternatives. Your muscles relax as you think about how simple it is to just walk to the bathroom when you need to. If you were poor, and again, most people were, you shared an outhouse with maybe 100 other families. Picture this. One wooden shack built over a deep pit in a shared courtyard behind a row of houses. No privacy, no paper, no way to wash your hands afterward. Just a hole in the ground with a wooden seat over it. The smell! Oh my god, the smell! Especially in summer. It was like a physical wall you had to walk through just to get close to the thing. And the flies. So many flies. They'd swarm around the opening and you'd just have to deal with it. A yawn escapes and you're suddenly very grateful for indoor plumbing. The wealthy had it better, but not by much. They had these things called water closets, basically early toilets that were installed right in the house. Sounds fancy, right? Well, here's the catch. They didn't have modern plumbing, so where did all that waste go? Straight down into a cesspool in the basement. Yeah, a big open pit of human waste directly under the house, just sitting there fermenting. The idea was that eventually someone would come and empty it. But, well, that didn't always happen on schedule. When the cesspool got full, the smell would start seeping up through the floorboards. The whole house would reek. People would wake up in the morning feeling sick from the fumes that had been building up overnight. So they'd call the night soil men. These were the guys who specialised in emptying cesspools and privies. They only worked at night because, well, the job was considered too disgusting for daylight hours. Can you imagine? The work was so gross that it was literally illegal to do it when people could see. Your breathing naturally slows, settling deeper as you try to imagine living above a basement full of sewage. These night soil men would show up with shovels and buckets and, well, they'd dig. They'd haul buckets of human waste up from the basement and load it onto carts. The smell during this process was indescribable. Neighbours would close their windows and stuff rags under their doors, but the stench would still seep in. And where did all this waste go? Well, that's where it gets interesting. See, human waste was actually valuable. Farmers needed fertiliser, and, well, human poop makes excellent fertiliser. So the night soil men would sell it. They'd cart it out to farms outside the city and sell it to farmers who would spread it on their fields. Which means the vegetables you'd eat for dinner were literally grown in human waste from the city, where people were dying of cholera and typhoid and God knows what else. The cycle was, well, it was pretty gross when you think about it. Getting more comfortable and honestly, thinking about their farming practices makes you appreciate modern agriculture. Joseph Bazalgette, the sewer king. But here's the thing, even this system was breaking down. By the 1850s, London was just too big, too many people producing too much waste. The night soil men couldn't keep up. Cesspools were overflowing, streets were flooded with sewage when it rained, and diseases were spreading like wildfire. People were getting desperate. Some folks just gave up on the cesspool system entirely. They dumped their chamber pots directly into the street, or out the window, or into the nearest river or stream. And guess what? All those rivers and streams led to the Thames, London's main source of drinking water. So people were literally drinking water, contaminated with their own sewage, and wondering why they kept getting sick. Your shoulders drop, releasing that tension as you think about how obvious the connection seems now. The government knew there was a problem. Scientists knew there was a problem. Hell, everyone with a nose knew there was a problem. But nobody could agree on what to do about it. Some people thought the solution was to build more cesspools. Others wanted to dump everything into the Thames and let the river carry it away. Still others thought they should just live with it. After all, London had always smelled bad. Why change now? And then came the summer of 1858. Oh boy, the summer of 1858. It was hot, like really hot. Temperatures that London just wasn't used to, day after day of blazing sun and no rain. The Thames started running low, leaving thick deposits of sewage on the riverbanks. And in that heat, well, things started to ferment. The smell was beyond description. Imagine every gross smell you've ever encountered, multiply it by 1,000, and then imagine having to breathe it 24 hours a day. People were vomiting just from walking near the river. Families were abandoning their homes if they lived too close to the Thames. A comfortable sigh escapes, and you're so thankful for modern waste management. The press started calling it the Great Stink. and it was great in the worst possible way. Charles Dickens wrote about it, calling the Thames a deadly sewer in the place of a fine, fresh river. Scientists took boat trips along the river, dropping pieces of white paper into the water to test how dirty it was. The paper disappeared instantly into the brown, soupy mess. But you know what finally got the government to act? When the smell reached Parliament. See, the Houses of Parliament sit right on the banks of the Thames, and in the summer of 1858, with the windows open for ventilation, well, the smell just poured in. Members of Parliament were literally fleeing the chamber, handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, gagging and retching. They tried dousing the curtains with lime and chloride to mask the smell. Didn't work. They considered relocating the entire government away from Westminster. That's how bad it was. The smell was so horrific that they were willing to abandon their brand new, expensive Parliament building rather than deal with it. Finally, they decided to do something about the sewage. That's it. Just relaxing into the story, thinking about how sometimes it takes a crisis to force change. They put a guy named Joseph Bazalgette in charge of fixing London's sewage problem. Poor bastard. Can you imagine getting that job? Hey Joe, we need you to figure out what to do with 2.5 million people's worth of poop, and we need it done yesterday. But Bazalgette was brilliant. He came up with a plan that was, well, it was audacious. He wanted to build a completely new sewer system for the entire city. Not just patch the old one, build a brand new one from scratch. The plan involved building over 1,000 miles of new sewers under London streets. These sewers would connect to main intercepting sewers that would carry all the waste downstream, away from the city centre, way downstream, like 8 miles downstream, where it would be dumped into the Thames at high tide. The scale of the project was insane. They had to dig up half the city, demolish entire neighbourhoods, relocate thousands of families, build massive pumping stations to move the sewage uphill, line everything with millions of bricks, create embankments along the Thames to house the new sewers. Your breathing slows, nice and easy, as you imagine the incredible amount of work this must have required. The unsung heroes of modern life. It took years of constant construction, constant noise, constant disruption, streets torn up everywhere, the smell of cement and brick dust mixing with the smell of sewage, workers covered in mud and worse, digging tunnels deep underground. And the cost? Oh, the cost. In today's money, we're talking about billions of pounds, maybe tens of billions. The government had to raise taxes, issue bonds, borrow money from banks. People complained constantly about the expense, but you know what? It worked. When the new sewer system finally came online, the change was immediate. The smell disappeared. The Thames started running cleaner. Disease rates plummeted. People could actually walk along the river without gagging. It was like magic. All those years of living with the stench, and suddenly it was just gone. Settling deeper into your bed, feeling that heavy, comfortable weight, and thinking about how amazing it must have felt to finally be able to breathe clean air. The new system wasn't perfect, of course. They were still dumping raw sewage into the Thames, just further downstream where it was someone else's problem. And the pumping stations broke down sometimes, causing temporary backups and overflows. But compared to what they'd been living with, it was a miracle. Unfortunately, not everyone benefited equally. The wealthy neighbourhoods got connected to the new system first. The poor areas? Well, they had to wait, sometimes for years. So while the rich were enjoying their new odour-free lives, the poor were still dealing with overflowing cesspools and sewage in the streets. Some things never change, right? But even for the poor, things gradually got better as more areas got connected to the new system. Public health improved across the board. Cholera outbreaks became less frequent. Typhoid rates dropped. People stopped dying from diseases that were entirely preventable. A yawn slips out and you're thinking about how much we take for granted. Clean water, functioning sewers, toilet paper. Speaking of toilet paper, yeah, that wasn't really a thing yet. The first commercially produced toilet paper wasn't sold until the 1870s, and even then it was expensive and not very common. So what did people use? Well, whatever they could find. Old newspapers were popular among the middle class. Corn cobs were common in rural areas. Leaves, if you could find them. rags that could be washed and reused. The wealthy might have soft cloths or even sponges, but most people just made do with whatever was available. And since there was no running water in most bathrooms, well, hand washing after using the toilet wasn't exactly standard practice. Which brings us back to disease. So much disease. Cholera was the big killer. It would sweep through London in waves, killing thousands of people at a time. Poor areas were hit hardest because they had the worst sanitation, but the disease didn't discriminate. Rich people died too. And doctors had no idea what caused it. Remember, this was before germ theory, before people understood that diseases were caused by bacteria and viruses. They thought cholera was caused by bad air, by breathing in the foul smells from sewage and rotting garbage. Your muscles relax, sinking deeper into the mattress as you think about how scary it must have been to live in a world where disease struck randomly, and doctors couldn't explain why. So their treatments were, well, let's call them creative. They'd try to purify the air with strong-smelling herbs. They'd burn sulfur or tar to create smoke that would supposedly chase away the disease. They'd give patients massive doses of opium or alcohol, thinking it would help them fight off the infection. None of it worked, of course. People kept dying. Families would lose multiple members in a single outbreak. Children were especially vulnerable. And through it all, the sewage kept flowing into the Thames, the same river people were drinking from. There was this one doctor, John Snow, who figured out the connection between contaminated water and cholera. He proved that people were getting sick from drinking sewage-contaminated water, not from breathing bad air. But nobody believed him. The medical establishment thought he was crazy. It wasn't until years later, after the great stink and the new sewer system, that people started to accept his theory. By then, thousands of people had died needlessly. Nice and easy, just breathing and thinking about how frustrating it must have been to know the solution but not be able to convince anyone to listen. Adapt, survive, and maybe still stink. Even after the sewers were built, old habits died hard. People were so used to dumping waste wherever was convenient that they kept doing it. Chamber pots still went out windows. Garbage still got thrown into the street. Factory waste still flowed into rivers. It took a generation for people to really change their behaviour, to understand that where you put your waste actually mattered, that rivers weren't just convenient dumps, they were water sources that other people depended on. The new sewer system helped, but it wasn't a complete solution. It was more like a really good start, a foundation that future generations could build on. And build on it they did. Over the decades that followed, London kept improving its sanitation systems. They added treatment plants, they built better pumps, they connected more neighbourhoods, they started regulating what factories could dump into the sewers. Slowly, very slowly, London transformed from one of the dirtiest cities in the world to one of the cleanest. Your breathing naturally deepens, settling into that warm, heavy feeling as you think about the incredible transformation that happened over just a few decades. The irony is that all this infrastructure, the sewers, the treatment plants, the regulations, it's basically invisible to most people. You turn on a tap and clean water comes out. You flush a toilet and waste disappears. You walk down the street and it doesn't smell like an open sewer. We don't think about it because it works so well, because people like Bazalgette did their job so thoroughly that we can just take it for granted. But for Victorians, especially in those years before the new sewer system, dealing with waste was a constant daily struggle. Every trip to the privy was an ordeal. Every drink of water was a gamble. Every breath of air carried the smell of decay and disease. They lived with it because they had to, because they didn't know there was an alternative, because they thought that's just how cities worked. Getting more comfortable, muscles melting into the bed, and feeling so grateful for all the invisible infrastructure that makes modern life possible. Even their clothes reflected the reality of living in a dirty world. Dark colours were popular because they hid stains better. Heavy fabrics were preferred because they lasted longer between washings. Elaborate decorations and patterns helped disguise spots and smudges. Fashion wasn't just about looking good, it was about looking good in a world where staying clean was nearly impossible. Women's long skirts weren't just fashionable, they were practical. They hid dirty shoes and stockings. They swept along the ground, picking up mud and refuse, but that was better than having your legs exposed to all the filth in the streets. Men's dark suits served the same purpose. Coal dust, horse manure, sewage splashback, it all blended into dark wool. A gentleman could walk through the streets of London and still look relatively presentable when he arrived at his destination. That's it. Nice and relaxed, thinking about how every aspect of their lives was shaped by the reality of living in a dirty world. And yet, they persevered. They found ways to be happy, to celebrate, to find beauty in their world despite all its challenges. They fell in love and got married and raised families. They wrote poetry and painted pictures and composed music. They were human beings, just like us. They just smelled a lot worse while doing it. Settling deeper, that heavy, comfortable feeling spreading through your body as the strange world of Victorian London starts to feel a little more real, a little more human, despite all its challenges and unpleasant realities. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander back to that distant time and place, to the bustling, often pungent streets of Victorian London. Let yourself imagine the lives of the rich and the poor, the clean and the less clean, all playing their parts in the great drama of human history. And as you do so, take comfort in the knowledge that your own life, however small and insignificant it may seem, is also a part of that great story. A thread in the tapestry of human experience that stretches back to the dawn of time and forward into the unknown future. For in the end, that is the great lesson of the Victorian era, that even amidst incredible challenges and less than ideal hygiene, humanity finds a way to innovate, adapt, and build a better future. And sometimes, all it takes is a really, really bad smell to get things done. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of clean water, fresh air, and the knowledge that your toothbrush is a truly miraculous invention. Sleep well, and may the blessings of modern plumbing be with you always. Hello, dear listeners. Gather round, settle in, and get ready for a different kind of story tonight. Forget the shining legends of flawless heroes and valiant dragons. Tonight, we're delving into the cold, heavy, and often smelly truth beneath the armour. No glorifying here, just the raw, gritty reality of surviving in steel. Before we dive into the delightful world of medieval bruises and bad sleep, tell me, where are you all tuning in from? Are you cozying up in a modern apartment, maybe enduring a long commute, or perhaps like me, just enjoying a moment of peace hidden from the general chaos of life? Drop a comment below and let me know your location and the time. And if this kind of unvarnished storytelling brings you even a smidgen of peace, or at least keeps you from doom scrolling, then a quick like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off to the same slow march through history. So, dim the lights, or, just turn your phone screen down. Let the imaginary fire in your imagination warm those stone walls, settle in, and let's begin with the rather undignified making of a knight. You are 7 years old when the path to knighthood begins, not with a gleaming sword, but with a rather unsentimental farewell. Your parents, undoubtedly proud and perhaps a touch relieved to offload a small, perpetually dirty human, send you off to serve in the household of a noble lord. There are no tearful goodbyes written in ink or preserved in keepsakes, just a brisk pat on the shoulder, a bundle of surprisingly scratchy clothing, and the entire weight of expectations settling on your small, still-growing frame. No one asks if you are ready. In truth, readiness is utterly irrelevant. You are a page now. The castle looms above you, stone towers stretching into a grey, perpetually judgmental sky. Its silhouette promises both greatness and hardship, but mostly it promises chores. The gate creaks open, groaning like an old knight after a particularly heavy feast. What lies beyond is not a world of honour and glory, but one of scrubbing, serving, and desperately trying to avoid getting trampled by a particularly ill-tempered stable boy. Chivalry, you quickly realise, will come much, much later, after years of fetching, carrying, and cleaning up after horses and noblemen with equally foul temperaments. Your duties are endless, stretching from sunrise to well after dark. You run errands, sweep halls, often for the third time that day because dust apparently multiplies. Deliver messages, usually to someone who then yells at you for the message, not the messenger, and assist with meals. On especially lucky days, you're permitted to polish armour, which sounds glamorous until you realise it means meticulously scraping dried mud and, shall we say, equine deposits from heavy iron boots. Your hands are perpetually blistered, your back aches in places you didn't even know existed, and the knights, they barely notice you. You are not yet one of them. You are the help, the invisible, perpetually grimy help. But even in these early unglamorous days, training begins. Wooden swords are handed out like brooms, and bruises bloom across your arms and shins with alarming frequency as you spar with other boys who, like you, are eager to prove something, usually by whacking each other vigorously. You're taught how to fall from a horse without immediately breaking your neck. You fall often. Some days, it feels like falling is the main lesson, punctuated by surprised grunts and the smell of fresh earth. No one praises you for bruising well, but they do scold you for weakness, which mostly means showing pain, crying, or looking generally pathetic. You learn quickly. Pain is to be swallowed, not displayed. Discipline is everything. Speak only when spoken to, bow deeper to those of higher rank, even if they just spilled ale on your head, and never, ever question a command, no matter how trivial or humiliating. Your mistakes are corrected with the back of a hand, usually a large calloused one, or a weak scrubbing chamber pots, which makes you question the very concept of noble living. One boy forgets to remove his cap in the presence of the lady of the house. He spends 2 days on his knees in the chapel, praying for humility, probably wondering if God had a sense of humour about headwear. No one forgets again. If your family is wealthy, a tutor may be assigned to teach you reading, writing, and perhaps a bit of Latin, though the Latin mostly seems useful for understanding church services and the incredibly depressing inscriptions on tombs. If not, you learn by imitation. You listen, you memorize prayers, you copy letters with shaky hands when the steward is generous enough to share a scrap of parchment. Literacy is a luxury. Muscle and obedience matter more. Still, you learn. You learn which fork to use, though most prefer fingers, which is far more practical. You learn to stand perfectly still for hours during court feasts, balancing platters of steaming meat while nobles talk politics and loudly complain about the wine. You learn to become a ghost when tempers flare, and to disappear entirely when drunken knights start boasting about past battles, which inevitably leads to more yelling and possibly a thrown goblet. Every moment is an education in survival, like a very intense, very unscheduled, and very painful masterclass in avoiding trouble. Mornings begin with Mass. The castle chapel is cold year-round, and your breath fogs in the air as you kneel on unforgiving stone floors and try not to fall asleep during the incredibly long liturgy. Faith is not optional. It is as much a part of your training as swordplay. You are taught to fear hellfire, to respect the church and its very powerful landholdings, and to confess regularly, mostly so the priests know all your dirty little secrets. They speak of divine purpose, of holy duty. You nod along, trying to stay awake, mostly praying not to get sick, because there are few remedies and fewer recoveries. Meals are brief, usually consisting of bread, cheese, and meat if you're lucky. Vegetables are suspect. Many believe raw greens cause illness, which is probably true given the sanitation of the era, and so you develop a steady diet of salted meat and dry crusts. You eat quickly, knowing your next soul-crushing task waits. On rare feast days there may be roast pig or honeyed oat cakes. These days are remembered for years, like hazy, delicious dreams glimpsed through smoke. In the evenings, the great hall grows lively. Minstrels sing ballads recounting tales of Arthur and Roland and saints who slayed dragons, and presumably their own laundry. You sit on the edges near the fire trying to catch every word. The songs are meant to inspire, but you are often too tired to be moved. You think more of your sore feet than of chivalric deeds. Still, something stirs in you. A hope, perhaps, that someday someone will sing of you, even if it's just about your remarkable ability to clean a latrine with dignity. You sleep where you can, often in the servants' quarters, shoulder to shoulder with other boys on straw pallets that smell vaguely of sweat, mildew, and existential dread. Some nights, You are pulled from sleep to help with late arrivals or unexpected guests. You learn to rise without complaint, to work through exhaustion, to never let your eyes betray fatigue. A knight, you're told, must be ready at any hour. The training starts here with the grim reality of forced midnight errands. You're not alone. Other pages suffer with you. You form silent friendships, built on shared glances, knowing nods, and muttered complaints that would get you a week in the stocks if anyone overheard. Together, you learn the rhythms of castle life. You learn which knights are cruel and which will look the other way when you steal a second helping of stew. You learn who to trust, who to fear, and which hidden corners of the castle offer a fleeting moment's peace from the endless demands. There are moments of levity, a jest from the cook, who surprisingly has a dark sense of humour, a clumsy knight tripping over a sleepy hound, a stolen apple that tastes like pure freedom. You cling to these moments. They remind you that life exists beyond duty, that laughter still has a place, even here, amidst the stone and grit. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of the world beyond the walls, merchants arriving with silks and exotic spices, a troupe of travelling performers who smell suspiciously like unwashed animals, or a noble woman riding past with her ridiculously large retinue. These sights feel foreign, like stories glimpsed through a thick fog. You're not part of that world yet, but maybe one day. Maybe. At times, doubt creeps in. The stories of glory feel impossibly distant. The reality is far more grinding. You wonder if all of this, the aching limbs, the scoldings, the constant low-level hunger, is truly the path to honour. But every so often you see a knight ride out in gleaming armour, pennant flying, and your chest tightens with the thought, someday that could be me, if I don't die from an infected blister first. Your lessons in humility do not stop with bruises and hunger. There are also ceremonies to attend, even though you're barely more than background noise in them. You observe as nobles gather, dressed in fine fabrics you're not allowed to touch, much less wear. You're reminded by their casual glances and sometimes their cutting words that your position is somewhere between useful and entirely invisible. When dignitaries visit, the castle becomes a bustling, anxiety-ridden theatre. You help prepare guest rooms, polish silver until your arms ache, and sweep the same corridors 3 times over. If anything is out of place, the pages are blamed, and if something goes wrong, say, a particularly ill-tempered dog bites a visiting bishop's leg, well, let's just say it helps to know how to look busy while being nowhere near the problem. You quickly master the art of looking furiously industrious while being completely unhelpful. On festival days, there is music, dancing, and entirely too much wine, at least for the adults. You're allowed to watch from the corners, soaking in the sounds and sights while pretending not to be watching too intently, because that would be creepy. Occasionally, someone slips you a sweetmeat or a bit of cake, and for a moment, the burdens of your position feel lighter, almost fluffy. But these small kindnesses do not erase the reality. Your place is to serve, observe, and remember, because remembering who's important is key to not getting yelled at. Some pages find escape in books if they can read. The old steward's chamber holds a handful of illuminated manuscripts, heavy, bound in leather, and guarded as fiercely as the Lord's own armoury. On lucky evenings, you're allowed to sit beside a flickering fire and listen as an older scribe reads aloud tales of Roman generals, who also seem to have a lot of problems, or saints who endured unspeakable trials, which sounds remarkably similar to your daily life. These stories feed the mind while your body slowly, achingly heals from the day's chores. There are warnings too, spoken in hushed tones or muttered by older, more cynical servants. They tell you of pages who failed to advance, boys who cracked under the pressure, or were sent home in disgrace. Sometimes they vanish without explanation, probably sent to a monastery or forced to become a very polite sheep herder. Sometimes you overhear things you were never meant to hear, whispers of plots, scandals, or unusually bad harvests. You quickly learn when to speak, when to nod, and when to keep your head down and look utterly oblivious. The castle is your crucible, and every hour spent within its walls forges you into something harder, leaner, more capable. Not a knight, not yet, but no longer a child. You are a creature in transition, battered, disciplined, and quietly, stubbornly determined. So when you lie awake at night staring at the wooden beams above your straw-filled mattress, which probably has bed bugs, let's be honest, you think not just of what you've endured, but of what lies ahead, the next phase, the next challenge, the next painful step on the path that will one day, if the gods, your lord, and your very tired body all permit, make you a knight. But for now, you are a page, and that, you decide, is enough. For now. At the age of 14, the apron strings of pagehood are ceremoniously snipped, though not with any kindness or softness. You are no longer a page. You are now a squire. And while this new title may sound like a promotion, it comes with considerably fewer sweetmeats and far, far more bruises. You have graduated from polishing floors to polishing armour, from fetching goblets to fetching the man who might be dying in one. Your new role is personal, intimate even. You are assigned to a knight, and you're expected to serve him as faithfully as a shadow. Where he goes, you go. If he rides into battle, you follow, probably praying a lot. If he falls, you run into the carnage to help him up, risking your own life in the process. You're no longer just a general castle grunt. You are the squire of a warrior, and your days are shaped by his demands, his moods, and his alarming tendency to get into fights. The physical training increases tenfold. Riding a warhorse, for instance, is not the elegant glide you once imagined from the ballads. These beasts are enormous, bred for power and war, and often more temperamental than most noblemen, after a particularly bad hangover. Mounting them is a small battle in itself. Controlling them, a constant sweaty negotiation. Your thighs ache, your spine jars with every thunderous step, and your backside hasn't felt normal since Michaelmas. Sword training intensifies. You now wield live blades, not to kill, usually, but sharp enough to cause serious concern if your opponent happens to be better rested or less distracted than you. You spar daily, your body covered in bruises that never quite fade before new ones bloom. Every session is an exercise in humility. For every swing you land, you take 3 in return. The knight you serve doesn't expect grace. He expects grit and a surprising tolerance for pain. But perhaps the most tiresome, soul-crushing part of your duties is equipment care. Armour, you quickly learn, is not just metal. It is an ecosystem. Sweat, grime, and the occasional lost slug somehow make their way into the joints of plate mail. You clean it, polish it, inspect every hinge and strap with the meticulousness of a nervous surgeon. If the greaves pinch or the helmet visor sticks mid-battle, that's your fault. If your knight dies because you missed a cracked buckle, you'll likely wish you'd died first, just to avoid the angry ghost of your former master. Weapons need sharpening daily. Lances must be tested for structural integrity, usually by whacking them against a tree. Shields examined for cracks. Your knight's life and your rapidly developing reputation depends on the absolute precision of your work. No one thanks you when everything goes right, but everyone notices when it doesn't. And then there are tournaments. They were romanticised when you were a page. Colourful affairs of trumpets and cheering maidens. Now, you see the blunted swords break bones. You are the one saddling the horse, carrying the ridiculously long lances, wiping the blood from your knight's cheek so he can smile for the crowd, and hopefully not pass out. If he wins, you collect the prize money, which he mostly keeps. If he loses, you collect his broken ribs and what remains of his dignity. It's like being a medieval sports therapist, but with more impalement risk. When real war comes, and it always does because medieval lords really loved a good skirmish, you march beside your knight into mud, rain, and uncertainty. Campaigns are long, uncomfortable affairs. Food is scarce. Sleep is scarcer. Your armour, if you have any, chafes in places you didn't know existed. You begin to understand the real meaning of exhaustion when your limbs move, only because you know you must, not because they want to. Battle is not glorious. It is a cacophony of screams, the clang of metal and orders lost in the wind, the sickening clash of bodies, the stench of blood and sweat, the sudden, terrible silence of a dying man. These become your grim education. You learn to distinguish between fear that sharpens you and fear that paralyzes you. You pray the former shows up more often. You're not there to fight, not yet. But that does not mean you are safe. When your knight is unhorsed, it is your job to reach him, lift him, pull him out of danger. Imagine dragging a man in full armor, each piece weighing more than a holiday roast, across a muddy field while arrows fall like very sharp rain. It is not heroic, it is back-breaking, and the reward is usually just the chance to do it again tomorrow. When your knight is injured, you tend to his wounds, often with surprisingly little medical knowledge. If he is captured, you're expected to negotiate or deliver messages to secure his release. Sometimes this means dealing with men who would rather see him rot in a dungeon, or worse, make him pay an exorbitant ransom. You learn diplomacy not from tutors but from sheer necessity. Your words must be careful, your posture humble, your tone respectful, even your silence becomes a powerful tool. There are moments, rare but real, when you feel a flicker of pride, when you lead your knight's horse into a camp and heads turn to look, when he nods at you after a battle, bloodied but alive, a silent acknowledgement of your indispensable role. These moments are fleeting, like sunlight through arrow slits, but they matter, they keep you going. Back at the castle, your duties continue. You train younger pages, passing on the same hard lessons you once learned, perhaps with a touch more or less sympathy than you received. You serve at banquets, help organize hunts, and remain at your knight's side whenever guests of importance arrive. Your sword is worn, your boots are cracked, and you move like a man twice your age, but you are no longer merely a servant. You are being watched, evaluated, measured. The priests still expect your prayers, your lord still expects your loyalty, and your body expects rest, which it rarely receives, but there is no turning back. The only way forward is through. You begin to think about your own coat of arms. What colours? What symbols? You dream about the moment of dubbing, the sword tapping your shoulders, the moment you rise, not as a squire, but as a knight. It feels impossibly far, it feels inevitable, it feels both. Then there are the hard days. The days when you bury a fellow squire trampled beneath a warhorse, or run through by a lance that didn't look blunted enough. No one sings songs for squires. No one writes poems for the boys who almost made it. You learn to carry grief without showing it. You learn to keep working even as the ground shifts beneath you, because the world doesn't stop for tears. If you are lucky, your knight teaches you more than just battle. He teaches you how to think, how to judge a man's character, how to read a battlefield, how to lead. If he is truly wise, he teaches you when to speak and when to hold your tongue, how to pick your battles, and how to lose with a shred of grace. These are not things armor can protect you from, but they are just as vital. Winter brings new challenges. You now understand that a sword is only as effective as the hand that can still feel its hilt. Your fingers crack from cold, and the metal of your knight's armor feels like ice as you buckle it on each morning. Snow turns the training yard into a mire of frozen mud. Horses slip. So do you. You do not complain. The weather, like war, does not care how you feel. There is talk among the older squires, talk of glory, of rebellion in the east, of a king's summons. You listen, absorb, calculate. You've seen enough to know that glory often looks suspiciously like a fresh grave. Still, you would ride out tomorrow if called. The waiting is often worse than the war. You write your first letter. It is stiff, clumsy, and formal, addressed to your parents if they are still alive and telling them little. You're not even sure where to send it, but writing it feels important, like anchoring yourself, like proving you're still someone beneath the bruises, sweat, and steel. One night after a feast, your knight, drunk on mead and nostalgia, tells you of his first campaign. He describes the rain, the hunger, the inexplicable thrill of surviving a desperate charge. Then he grows quiet. He stares into the fire and names 3 men who did not return. You do not speak. You are meant to listen and remember. You practice daily, sometimes in secret. You mimic your knight's stance, his footwork, the way he holds his blade just before a strike. You copy everything, hoping that imitation will one day become instinct. You bleed, you limp, you learn. Then one morning, without fanfare, your name is called. You are to ride with your knight, not as an observer, but as his second. There is no sleep the night before, no sleep is needed. When you mount your horse, you are ready. Not perfect, not fearless, but ready. Your story is still being written, but already it is etched into the cold iron of swords, the dust of roads, the calluses on your hands. You are no longer a boy, not quite a man, but closer now. You are a squire, and you are becoming. You're 21 years old, or near enough. Some squires are knighted younger, some older, but the number doesn't matter half so much as the fact that someone in authority has finally decided you're ready. Ready to kneel, ready to swear, ready, in theory, to kill and die with a little more official ceremony attached. There's no sudden transformation. You don't wake up with a deeper voice or a miraculously firmer jawline. You're still sore from yesterday's training, still have mud on your boots and a scar across your shoulder that won't quite heal. But this is the moment your entire youth has crawled toward. Your body bruised, your pride battered, your hands hardened by years of polishing, sharpening, carrying, and serving. It has all led here to the day of your knighthood. It begins with solitude. You're given a chamber, small and cold, in which to pray, reflect, and fast through the night. There's nothing glamorous about it, just stone walls, a single sputtering candle, and a chapel-supplied blanket that somehow manages to be both thin and incredibly scratchy. You kneel on the floor, bones aching, stomach grumbling, and try not to think about the warmth of the kitchens or the tantalizing scent of roasting pork wafting from below. This vigil is meant to purify the soul, to prepare you to accept the sacred duties of a knight. You're expected to meditate on the responsibilities ahead, defending the weak. Good luck with that. Serving your lord, most of whom are quite demanding, upholding the church, which has many rules, and fighting with honor, which sounds very noble but often involves a lot of mud. In practice, you spend as much time wondering whether anyone would notice if you had a tiny sip of water, or sat down for 5 blessed minutes. You're not alone in your discomfort. Dozens of squires have kept this vigil before you, some trembling with anticipation, others feigning serenity. You wonder which you are. You try to remember all the prayers, the creeds, the proper posture. You try not to think about the rumours of squires vomiting from nerves during the ceremony, or passing out mid-kneel. That would be unfortunate. Memorable, but unfortunate. Come dawn, you are escorted to the main hall. It is transformed for the occasion. Banners hang, candles flicker, and nobles, knights, and priests gather in ceremonial dress, whispering politely behind gloved hands. A hush falls as you enter. Your name is announced. You kneel. Your lord, or perhaps the king, depending on your station and how important you are, approaches. He carries a sword, a symbol of service and power. It may not be his own blade. Some lords keep a ceremonial sword just for this purpose, polished to a mirror shine and never actually used in battle. You try not to look too closely. You try not to shake. The sword taps your shoulders, left, then right. The dubbing. In some traditions, you're also given a symbolic slap, a reminder of the physical and moral pain you must now endure without complaint. It's less of a blow and more of a firm pat, but the message is clear. A knight's duty is not to comfort, but to sacrifice, and occasionally get slapped. Then comes the oath. You speak solemnly, pledging loyalty to your liege, to God, and to the increasingly aspirational ideals of chivalry. You promise to defend the weak, to protect women, to speak truth, and to fight with honor. You repeat the words with as much gravity as you can muster, though you silently wonder how many knights still actually live by them, especially the truth part. With the oath complete, you rise. Not as a boy, not as a servant, but as a knight. The change is subtle, internal, and yet profound. People who barely glanced at you yesterday now nod in solemn approval. Your peers clap your shoulder, their expressions a mixture of respect and mild envy. Your lord offers a tight-lipped smile, which by noble standards might as well be a standing ovation and a confetti cannon. There may be a feast afterward, depending on the wealth of your lord or the mood of the court. If so, You sit a little higher at the table, drink from a finer cup, and receive congratulations from nobles you once served wine to. It's quite the upgrade from the straw pallet. Some squires are knighted on battlefields, their ceremony improvised amidst carnage, which is much more dramatic, but less comfortable. Others receive the full pageantry. Either way, the weight of the title settles on your shoulders, heavy as chainmail. Knighthood, as it turns out, is not a destination, but a doorway, a very heavy, creaky doorway that leads to more responsibility. The world does not slow down for you to enjoy your new status. Your duties expand immediately. You're now expected to lead men, not just follow them, to make decisions, not simply obey, to ride at the front, not the rear. The same sword that dubbed you a knight is now yours to wield, and no one will double-check your choices anymore. If you err, it will be public, and it will be costly. You're also now accountable in new ways. A knight's word is binding. Your signature carries weight. Your absence at court is noted, and your presence in church is assumed. So no skipping mass, even if your foot hurts. If you drink too deeply or speak too freely, it reflects not only on you but on your household, your banner, and your liege. A slip of the tongue can sour alliances. A drunken scuffle can undo months of delicate diplomacy. In short, your margin for error shrinks dramatically the moment your shoulder is tapped with a sword. Suddenly, everyone expects you to be a grown-up. Your responsibilities extend beyond battle. If your lord grants you land, and hopefully he does because knights need to eat, you are expected to manage it wisely. That means collecting taxes from those perpetually hungry peasants, settling disputes among peasants, usually about a cow or a chicken, maintaining roads, which are always muddy, and ensuring the harvest is strong. Knights are often imagined as warriors alone, but in truth they are administrators, enforcers, and landlords. Your sword may rest in its scabbard for months at a time, but your seal is pressed into wax almost daily. It's like being a medieval CEO, but with more potential for disembowelment. You also now have your own squire. The irony is not lost on you. He is young, uncertain, and probably as eager to please and terrified as you once were. You teach him to polish your armour just so, to saddle your horse without bruising its haunches, to pour wine without spilling. You correct him gently at first, then more firmly, because you're a knight now, damn it. He reminds you of yourself. It is humbling, and slightly amusing, to see how far you've come and how far you still have to go. There is also the matter of your coat of arms. If you haven't had one before, it must now be chosen. Colours, symbols, family mottos, they all matter. They identify you on the field of battle and in court. They speak before you do. A red lion rampant on a field of gold says something very different than a black cross on a white bend. Choose wisely, or pay a herald to help, because you don't want to accidentally declare yourself the knight of the fluffy bunnies. Your new armour is fitted to your frame, assuming your lord is generous or your family still has coin to spare. Full plate is expensive, and every piece must be custom-made. Greaves for your legs, gauntlets for your hands, a cuirass for your chest. You stand still as the blacksmiths measure and clink their fingers, leaving soot on your skin. The weight is impressive. Walking in it feels like learning to move all over again, like being a particularly clumsy robot. But you feel safe inside it too, as if metal might guard not only your body but your newly elevated name. You take your first formal ride through the village, not as a servant trailing behind a retinue, but at its head. Children run to the roadside, their mouths agape. Old men bow stiffly. A woman tosses you a flower, hopefully not a rotten one. You try not to look too pleased, maintaining a stoic, knightly expression. The peasants don't cheer exactly, but they do stare, and in the medieval world, attention is a kind of applause. That night, in the solitude of your chamber, you remove each piece of armour slowly, methodically. You place your sword with care. You stare at your reflection in the polished plate and try to see what others saw today. A knight, a protector, a leader. You do not quite believe it yet, but you will. Not everything changes overnight. You still train each day. You still wake early and pray, mostly for the pain in your knee to go away. You still limp after a long ride and wince when a blade catches your elbow during training. But your name is called with more weight now. You are consulted, not commanded. The youngest squires eye you with something like awe or fear, or possibly both. War will come again. You know this. And when it does, your position in the vanguard will be expected. No more standing behind a shield wall. No more waiting for orders. You will lead the charge, raise your voice above the din, and be the first to cross the field. If fortune favours you, you may return with honour. If not, your coat of arms will be carried home without you, probably quite muddy. This is the cost of the accolade. This is the burden of the oath. But still, you are proud, not of your status but of your survival. You endured the long years, the cold vigils, the humiliation, the relentless training, the fear, and now you wear the title as a second skin. You are a knight, and your real service has only just begun. You do not become a knight and immediately feel powerful. You become a knight, and then you are handed 60 pounds of steel and told to get on a horse. The first real lesson of knighthood is not how to fight, but how to walk, breathe, and not fall over in your own armour. At first, it's chainmail, a horrifyingly heavy shirt of interlocking rings that drapes over your shoulders like an iron tunic. It's not as heavy as it looks, but it clings to you, drags at your limbs, and catches every single drop of sweat your body produces. Beneath it, you wear a padded gambeson, quilted linen stuffed with wool or rags, which smells absolutely awful after a single skirmish, and even worse after a week. But it keeps the mail from grinding against your skin like a particularly aggressive cheese grater, so you tolerate the stench. As warfare evolves, so does your kit. Plate armour begins to replace mail, at first just a breastplate and greaves, then pauldrons for your shoulders, vambraces for your forearms, sabatons to encase your feet, articulated joints, riveted segments, each addition designed to protect without pinching, though they almost always manage to do both. Eventually, you are sheathed in metal from crown to toe, and it's less like wearing clothes and more like being folded into a walking bell. The helmet is the absolute worst. It muffles your hearing, narrows your vision to an alarming degree, and steams up with your own breath in battle, making you feel like a heavily armoured, very confused tea kettle. In battle, it protects your skull, mostly. Outside of battle, it functions primarily to give you a throbbing headache and make you look vaguely ridiculous. Some helms have visors you can lift, which helps with breathing, spitting, and occasionally seeing where you're going, though it also makes your face an easier target. Trade-offs are everywhere in armour. Mobility, surprisingly, is not impossible. You can run, squat, mount a horse, even roll if trained well. But everything takes effort. You are not agile, you are deliberate, and you quickly learn to conserve movement like a man counting his last coins. After all, if your opponent wears nothing heavier than boiled leather, he'll be darting around while you resemble a mobile sculpture of St. George, probably covered in bird droppings. Then there's the maintenance. Every single piece must be cleaned, oiled, inspected. A single rusted rivet can jam a joint. A dented chest plate can buckle under a second blow. Your squire essentially becomes a blacksmith's apprentice overnight, scrubbing and hammering late into the evening. If he forgets a strap or fails to fasten your cuisses, thigh armour, correctly, you notice it painfully and immediately. And let's not forget the weapons. Your sword is your constant companion, but not your only one. It is not the slim rapier of modern imagination, but a broad, weighty blade meant for hacking, not fencing. Its edge is kept sharp, but not razor-thin, better to survive impact. You carry it at your side, but draw it only when necessary. The sword is both symbol and tool, and in your hand, it becomes an extension of your very tired will. Then there's the lance. A knight without a lance is like a fish without gills, utterly useless in open battle. The lance is not delicate. It is a sharpened pole, roughly 10 feet long, meant to be couched under your arm and driven like a battering ram into whoever's unlucky enough to be across the field on horseback. It turns your momentum into deadly force, but it is also unwieldy, easy to miss with, and once broken, mostly good for poking campfires. The mace is a brutal companion, short, stubby and blunt. No finesse, no elegance, just a lump of iron on a stick designed to cave in helmets and crack ribs. Useful when your enemy's armour laughs off blades. When subtlety fails, the mace makes its point with savage clarity. Axes are similar, less common among knights, more typical of mercenaries or those from northern stock, but in close quarters, an axe can hook a shield, split a helm, or drag a man off a horse. It's not considered gentlemanly, but neither, to be fair, is medieval warfare. Shields serve both offensive and defensive roles. You carry one, usually kite-shaped or heater-style, slung across your back or strapped to your forearm. It bears your coat of arms, a bright splash of symbolism amidst the mud and smoke. You learn to punch with it, to deflect, to absorb force. A good shield might save your life. A bad one might become your coffin lid. Siege weapons are a different beast altogether. Catapults, trebuchets and battering rams, handled by engineers and lower soldiers. You observe them more than operate them, unless you're particularly unlucky. But you'll definitely learn to fear them. No armour can save you from a boulder. When battle comes, your kit is both saviour and prison. On the charge, you ride with couched lance, shield raised, visor down. Your world becomes a tunnel of noise and blur. Impact is sudden and absolute. You hit or are hit. You fall or you do not. And if you do fall, it is up to someone else, perhaps your very anxious squire, to drag you clear before the trampling begins. After the charge, if you are still upright, comes the melee. Sword drawn, you engage man to man. It is not graceful. It is a messy, grunting symphony of blood and clanging steel. You swing, you block, you pray. You aim not for heroics, but for joints, armpits, behind the knees, visor slits, the weak points. Every knight has them, and if you don't find theirs, they'll certainly find yours. In the aftermath, assuming you survive, you learn the lesser-known role of a knight, repairman. You remove your armour piece by piece, every dent and scratch telling its own small, painful story. If a rivet snapped or a strap tore, it's noted, recorded, and mended. Your sword is cleaned, inspected, re-oiled. Every weapon dulled must be sharpened. You don't sleep until your gear is ready again, because next time, it could mean your life. You begin to appreciate the subtle differences between good steel and bad. You learn the smiths by name, the balance of a sword, the precise weight of a shield, the exact line where a helmet should rest against your brow. All become second nature. You grow fussy about details that once seemed trivial, the type of leather used in your gauntlets, the weight distribution of a new axe, the way a visor latches shut. Some knights personalise their equipment with flair, engrave pommels, crests etched into breastplates, gilt inlays. You may do the same if coin and vanity permit. But beneath the ornament lies the same brutal reality. Armour is not costume. It is coffin prevention. There are downsides, of course. Armour is expensive. Your share of spoils from war or tournaments often vanishes into repairs and replacements. And then there's the matter of heat. Summer in a full suit of plate is like walking inside a forge, especially in the midday sun. You sweat buckets, faint if you're not careful, and attract flies with all the grace of a walking roast. Despite it all, you come to trust your gear like a second skin. You've tested it under arrow fire. You've felt the jolt of a mace strike echo through your ribs and known the armour did its job. It protects, yes, but it also transforms you. You walk taller in it. People part when they see you coming. Children point, commoners bow. And yet, you know this. The steel does not make you invincible. It merely postpones the inevitable. You can fight well, prepare thoroughly, and equip yourself with the finest gear. But in the end, it's still just you, a very expensive tin can, hoping for a bit of luck. Hey there, night owls, history buffs, and anyone currently regretting their life choices. Welcome to tonight's epic Stone Age survival guide, where we peel back the rough, untanned layers of what it was really like to be a cave person. And, I mean really like. Not the cartoon version with clubs and grunting that basically skips over the existential dread of finding dinner. We're diving deep into the actual bone-chilling, frequently hilarious, in hindsight, day-to-day life of people who lived 25,000 years ago. Spoiler alert, they were probably way cooler than us, despite the distinct lack of Wi-Fi. Oh, and if you're enjoying these wild tales from the ancient past, I'd really appreciate a like or a subscribe. It's the digital equivalent of offering me a perfectly napped flint blade, and believe me, those were highly sought after. Super curious where you're all drifting off to this glorious nonsense from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Seriously, it always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to my voice all over the world, from Slatina, Olt County, Romania, where it's currently 4:44 AM on Tuesday, June 25th, 2025, perfect for some pre-dawn prehistoric musings, to, well, everywhere else. You guys are my peculiar people. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice, slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever glorious, modern comfort you're currently lounging on. We're heading back to the Paleolithic period, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done, possibly even weep with gratitude. So, congratulations, you just woke up. You're not in your comfy bed, you're in a cave, 25,000 years ago. The first thing that slams into you harder than a woolly rhino with a migraine is the cold, not just chilly. We're talking bone-deep, teeth-chattering, muscles clenching so hard you think they'll snap cold. You're lying on what feels suspiciously like the world's absolute worst camping gear. Bunches of sedge grass and rushes that some optimistic soul carefully arranged into a sleeping mat. It's scratchy, like really scratchy. These grass stems poke through whatever unfortunate animal skin you've pulled over yourself, and every time you shift they crinkle and rustle like nature's most uncomfortable, unsweetened breakfast cereal. Your nose, which until now has probably enjoyed the refined aromas of fresh coffee and clean laundry, is suddenly assaulted by smells that are just intense. Wood smoke? Yeah, that's familiar. But also something profoundly musty and earthy from the ancient cave walls, like a basement that's been damp for millennia. The leftover scent of cooked, or vaguely warmed meat from last night's meal mixes aggressively with the sharper, unavoidable smell of unwashed human bodies, yours included. Congrats. There's this underlying funk of animal fat that's been used for waterproofing and warmth, plus something green and vaguely plant-like from all the grass bedding around you. It's a symphony of smells, and none of them are particularly pleasant. Welcome to the Paleolithic aromatherapy session. You can actually hear the cave breathing, if that makes sense. Little echoes of dripping water somewhere deeper in the inky darkness, like a leaky faucet in a colossal stone bathroom. The soft, resonant snoring of maybe 20 other people scattered around you on their own glorious grass mats. Someone's baby makes those tiny, surprisingly loud sleeping sounds babies make, which are probably the only truly sweet sounds in the entire cave. Outside the cave entrance, you catch the distant, crisp calls of birds starting their suspiciously early day, and maybe the rustle of some unseen, possibly dangerous animal moving through the brush. And your body? Oh, your body aches. I mean, really aches. Yesterday was a long, brutal day of walking, hunting and gathering, and you can feel it in every single muscle fibre, from your cramped toes to your perpetually stiff neck. Your feet are probably tough as leather by now, a testament to thousands of miles walked barefoot, but they're still screaming in protest from scrambling over jagged rocks and muddy terrain. Your back has that specific, unyielding stiffness that comes from sleeping on the literal ground for, well, your entire life. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? Pretty much everything else. Your first thought is probably, can I get a refund on this experience? Actually, let me back up and paint this picture properly. You're not some primitive grunt shuffling around in animal skins, making noises that belong in a bad B-movie. Oh no, you're actually incredibly skilled. Like, scary skilled. You know the names and uses of hundreds of plants, which ones are food, which ones are medicine, and which ones will make your intestines stage a violent protest. You can track animals by the tiniest, almost invisible signs. A bent blade of grass, a barely perceptible scuff mark on a rock, a subtle change in the air currents. You can make fire from scratch, using nothing but friction and sheer force of will. You can knap stone tools that are genuinely sharper than modern steel, and probably less likely to rust. And you can read the weather by simply watching how birds fly, which makes our Doppler radar look positively amateur. But here's the kicker. All that amazing, mind-boggling skill? You need every single bit of it just to not die before lunchtime. No pressure. You shift on your grass bed trying to find a position that doesn't involve something sharp poking into your ribs, or worse, your vital organs. Ah, that's better. The animal skin over you, probably deer or elk, is actually pretty warm once you manage to get settled. These hides have been painstakingly prepared, scraped, stretched and worked until they're soft and flexible. Well, softish. Everything is relative when you're living in the Stone Age. Comfort is defined by not actively painful. As your eyes finally adjust to the dim, grudging light filtering in from the cave mouth, you start to make out the ghostly shapes around you. Your family group is scattered across this main chamber, your mate and children close by, probably huddled together like particularly furry marmots. Your parents, siblings and cousins are arranged in family clusters around the central fire pit. 23 people total, which is pretty typical for a nomadic band like this. It's a close-knit community because your survival literally depends on everyone else. No room for personal space issues here. The fire. Oh man, the fire. It's not just important, it's the most important thing in your entire world. It's the original home security system, the central heating, the kitchen, and the social hub, all rolled into one. And right now, it's just a sad pile of glowing embers and ash, clinging to life by a thread. Someone, probably whoever had last watch, and hopefully didn't fall asleep on the job, has managed to keep it alive through the night, feeding it slowly, carefully, with precisely selected pieces of wood. The embers pulse a deep, vital red and orange in the cave's encompassing darkness, throwing shifting, dramatic shadows on the ancient stone walls. Getting that fire going each morning isn't like flicking a light switch, it's a ceremonial, life-or-death performance. Starting a fire from nothing is genuinely hard work, even when you know exactly what you're doing. So, your people never, ever let it die completely. There's always someone responsible for keeping those precious embers alive, adding just enough fuel to maintain the heat without wasting a single precious piece of wood. It's the ultimate don't mess this up job. You can smell the specific comforting scent of the wood they've been burning, oak and ash mostly, with some birch mixed in. Different woods, you know, instinctively burn differently, and your people know exactly which ones to use for cooking. Steady, low smoke, versus heat, long burning, versus light, bright, less smoke. Oak burns long and steady, a good base. Birch catches easily and gives off that surprisingly sweet, almost piney smell. Pine is fantastic for starting fires, but far too smoky for cooking. It's a culinary and pyrotechnic art form passed down through millennia. Time to get up. You push yourself upright on your grass mat, and every single joint in your body protests with a creak, a pop, or an unsettling click. Your hip pops like a twig. Your neck clicks like a rusty old door hinge. Welcome to life before chiropractors, ibuprofen, or even the vague concept of a comfortable pillow. Around you, other people are starting to stir too, groaning and stretching like a tribe of very stiff, very hairy sloths. Someone yawns, a big jaw-cracking yawn that you feel in your own mouth in sympathetic agony. Someone else stretches with a groan that echoes slightly off the cave walls. The morning routine is always, rigidly, the same. Fire first. Everything else depends on the fire. Without it, you're basically frozen, hungry, and probably about to be eaten. You carefully get to your feet, and the cave floor is a shock of cold against your bare soles. These caves, you know from a lifetime of experience, maintain a pretty constant temperature year-round. Warmer than outside in winter, cooler in summer. But stone is still stone, and it's a phenomenal conductor of cold. Your feet have developed calluses thick as actual leather, but that icy chill still seeps through. Walking toward the fire pit, you pass other members of your band who are also stirring to life, shaking off the night's cold. Carla, the best tracker in your group, is already sitting up, meticulously checking the stone tools she keeps beside her sleeping area, probably ensuring no tiny chips have mysteriously appeared overnight. Brune, who's probably the closest thing you have to a leader, he's good at making decisions and doesn't panic when a bear shows up, is examining the glowing embers. thoughtfully deciding what kind of wood to add next. The fire pit itself is carefully constructed in a depression in the cave floor, painstakingly lined with stones to contain the heat and reflect it back up. Around it, the ground is worn smooth from literally generations of people sitting and working in this exact spot. You can see the faint, ancient stains from countless meals, the subtle char marks from dropped embers, the smooth, polished patches where stone tools have been patiently knapped for thousands and thousands of hours. It's a living, breathing historical record beneath your feet. Bruun nods at you as you approach, a silent, morning acknowledgement. He's already selected some thin, dry kindling, birch bark and fine twigs, that will catch easily from the embers. You help him arrange the wood in a careful, almost architectural structure, building up from the smallest pieces to create the precise airflow for the flames to take hold. Working together, a silent, ancient ballet of cooperation, you blow gently on the embers, coaxing them back to life. The red glow brightens, pulsing with renewed vigour, and tiny, tentative flames begin to lick at the birch bark. The smell of smoke gets stronger, mixing with that distinctive, comforting scent of hot stone and ash. More flames catch, greedily consuming the kindling, and suddenly, magically, you have real fire again. Dancing, crackling, wonderful fire that pushes back the oppressive darkness and instantly begins to warm your stiff, numb hands. Fire is life. Fire is protection. Fire is the fundamental difference between human and animal, a constant reminder of your species' ingenuity. Around the growing flames, more people gather, drawn by the warmth and the promise of a meal. Children who were still sleepy moments ago become instantly alert and focused, their eyes wide and reflecting the dancing light. Fire means warmth, but it also means food, and everyone's stomach is reminding them, loudly, that they haven't eaten since yesterday evening. The good news about being a hunter-gatherer is that you don't have to worry about a mortgage or taxes or your boss being unhappy with your quarterly performance review, unless your boss is a saber-toothed tiger, in which case you have bigger problems. The bad news is that every single day starts with the existential question, what are we going to eat, and how are we going to get it? Yesterday was a decent day. The hunters managed to bring down a deer, not huge, but enough to feed everyone with some precious leftovers for today. The gatherers came back with their carrying bags full of nuts, roots and berries. But that was yesterday. Today you're starting from scratch, facing the eternal problem of the fridge being empty. You settle into the familiar rhythm of morning preparation. Someone fetches water from the stream that runs conveniently past your cave, clear, cold water carried in containers made from ingenious animal bladders and carefully carved wood. Someone else starts preparing some of yesterday's leftover meat for a quick morning meal. The meat gets spitted on sharpened sticks and held over the flames until it's heated through. Not really cooked in the modern sense. This is more like reheating leftovers, but warm food on a cold morning is a small, glorious miracle. The smell of heating meat mixes tantalizingly with the wood smoke, and your stomach makes that empty, anticipatory rumble that always precedes breakfast. While you're eating your small, precious portion of warmed meat and some nuts from yesterday's gathering, the day's planning begins. This isn't like a modern business meeting with agendas, PowerPoint presentations, or a complimentary bagel spread. It's more like a casual, low-volume conversation around the fire, but the stakes are quite literally life and death. The hunting party, maybe 6 or 7 of the strongest, most skilled individuals, will head east today, following the deer trail that was spotted yesterday. Deer are creatures of habit, and if you know their patterns, you can intercept them at water sources or prime feeding areas. But hunting big game with stone-tipped spears and wooden clubs is dangerous, difficult, and frequently frustrating work. Most hunting expeditions, you know from bitter experience, come back empty-handed. The gathering party, which you're usually a part of, will spread out through the forest, meticulously looking for anything edible. Nuts, berries, roots, tubers, mushrooms, bird eggs, insects, a surprising source of protein, and medicinal plants. Gathering, ironically, is actually far more reliable than hunting. You almost always find something, but it requires an incredible encyclopedic knowledge of the natural world. You need to know which berries are safe and which will kill you in unspeakably painful ways, which roots are edible and which will make you violently sick for days, which mushrooms are food and which are poison, when and where to find bird eggs without getting pecked, how to process bitter nuts to make them edible, and crucially, where the good tool-making stones can be found. Your people carry this staggering amount of knowledge in their heads, hundreds of pieces of vital information passed down through generations of trial and error, and incredibly careful observation. There are no books, no Google, no instruction manuals, no helpful YouTube tutorials, just human memory, hard-won experience, and the terrifying consequences of making a mistake. As the morning fire burns brighter and the cave starts to warm up, a general hum of activity fills the air. People begin the daily ritual of checking and maintaining their tools. Stone tools dull with use and need constant painstaking attention. Wooden spears get damaged and require careful repair. Clothing made from valuable animal skins needs mending, patching, and waterproofing. You examine your own personal kit. The stone knife you made yourself, honed to lethal sharpness. Your trusty wooden digging stick. The small, soft leather pouch that holds your precious fire-making materials. A little nest of dry tinder, a bit of pyrite. Everything you own is essential, practical, and fits in your hands, or hangs from a simple belt made of twisted plant fibers. Your knife, you notice, has a few small chips in the edge from yesterday's arduous work. Nothing serious, but it could definitely be sharper. Knapping, shaping stone tools, is both an art and a science, a dance between precision and brute force. You need to understand how different types of stone fracture, how to strike them at just the right angle, with just the right force to remove perfect razor-sharp flakes and create a keen edge. It's incredibly precise work that requires years of dedicated practice, a steady hand, and the patience of a saint. You settle into a comfortable position, cross-legged with your hammerstone, a harder, denser rock used for striking, and start the careful, rhythmic process of resharpening your knife. Each strike has to be placed exactly right. Too hard, and you'll shatter the tool. Too soft, and nothing happens. Hit it at the wrong angle, and you'll ruin hours of previous work. The crisp sound of stone on stone rings through the cave as other people work on their own tools, a familiar, comforting sound, the constant soundtrack of Paleolithic life. Chip, 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 the rhythmic percussion of survival. Your knife sharpens nicely. The edge is now keener than most modern kitchen knives, sharp enough to slice through hide, meat, and tough plant material with terrifying ease. You test it carefully on a small piece of leather, and it cuts cleanly, effortlessly. Good. This humble tool might very well save your life today. Around you, the cave is coming fully alive with a controlled chaos. Children who are old enough help with basic, vital tasks, feeding the fire, organizing the sleeping areas, checking water containers. Younger kids stay close to their mothers, but even they're learning by constant observation, absorbing knowledge like sponges. There's no formal education here, no classrooms, just constant immersive observation and gradual participation in adult activities. The really little ones, babies and toddlers, are kept warm and safe near the fire while their mothers prepare for the day's work. One baby is fussing, and her mother nurses her while simultaneously checking over her gathering tools. Multitasking, you realize, was invented about 2.5 million years ago. Take that, modern office workers. You shift position again, getting more comfortable as the cave slowly, gloriously warms. The familiar sounds and smells and textures of this morning routine are oddly soothing despite the harsh realities. This is your world. This is your family. This is home. As the sun climbs higher outside the cave, sending more insistent light through the entrance, the pace of preparation picks up. People start moving toward the mouth of the cave, a quiet exodus, ready to begin another day of searching for food, for materials, for everything you need to survive. But before anyone goes anywhere, there's one more crucial morning task: assessing the weather and the world outside. Brune, along with 2 other experienced hunters, walks to the cave entrance to study the day. They're looking at the sky, feeling the subtle shifts in the wind, listening intently to the distant sounds of birds and animals. Weather prediction. without meteorologists or Doppler radar, requires reading dozens of subtle environmental cues. Cloud formations tell stories about coming storms. Wind direction indicates where rain might be heading or where game might be moving. The behavior of birds and animals gives vital clues about atmospheric pressure changes. The color of the dawn sky, the feel of the air, the specific smells carried on the breeze, all of it matters when your very life depends on being outside in whatever nature decides to throw at you. Today looks promising. The sky is clear, a vast, unbroken expanse of blue. The wind is calm, barely a whisper. You can hear the normal, cheerful chatter of birds in the forest, their calls sounding relaxed and unalarmed. No signs of incoming bad weather, which means good hunting and gathering conditions. Time to go face the world, armed with nothing but your wits, your skills, and your communal support. You gather your tools and equipment, your honed stone knife, your sturdy wooden digging stick, your soft leather carrying pouch, and the small precious piece of fire-starting material wrapped in bark. Everything you own fits in your hands or hangs from a simple belt made of twisted plant fibers. It's a surprisingly liberating feeling, this lack of possessions. The gathering party assembles near the cave entrance, 8 people today, including yourself, all equipped with the essential tools needed for finding and collecting food. You're wearing your usual outfit, practical leather leggings and a tunic made from carefully prepared deer hide, soft leather boots stuffed with grass for insulation, and a heavier skin cloak that can be wrapped around you if the weather turns cold. Your clothes fit well and move with your body. These aren't random animal skins thrown haphazardly over your shoulders. They're carefully tailored garments, sewn with sinew thread using bone needles. The leather has been painstakingly treated with animal fat to make it water resistant, and the seams are reinforced in places that take the most stress. Everything about your outfit is functional, utterly practical, and designed for survival. No pockets, you don't need them when you only own a few tools. No zippers or buttons, everything fastens with ingenious leather ties or simple toggles made from bone or antler. No synthetic materials, obviously, but also no cotton or wool. Just leather and fur and plant fibers, all processed by hand, using techniques passed down through countless unrecorded generations. Standing at the cave entrance, looking out at the forest that stretches endlessly in all directions, an unbroken expanse of ancient trees, you feel the familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety that starts every single day. Out there is everything you need to survive. Food, materials, resources. But out there is also everything that can kill you. Large predators. Saber-toothed tigers are not cuddly. Venomous snakes, poisonous plants, fast-moving rivers, treacherous cliff edges, sudden, violent storms, and rival groups of humans who might not be friendly, and are also very good at throwing spears. Getting lost, getting injured far from help. 1,000 ways to die, and only your knowledge, your skills, and the unwavering cooperation of your band to protect you. It's like living inside a nature documentary where you're always the prey. You take a deep breath of the morning air. It smells like pure forest, green and alive and complex. Damp earth and decomposing leaves, growing plants, and the faint, exciting musk of animals that passed this way recently. Clean air, pure air, air that hasn't been touched by pollution or industry or any of the invisible, insidious substances that modern humans breathe every day. The sun feels good on your face as you step out of the cave. Real sunlight, not filtered through windows or reflected off buildings, but direct, unadulterated solar radiation that will warm your skin and provide the clear light you need to work by. No electricity, no artificial lighting, just the sun and moon and stars and your life-giving fire. Your feet, tough and sure, find the familiar path that leads down from your cave toward the forest floor. This path, you realize with a quiet reverence, has been worn smooth by generations of your people, making this exact same journey every day for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Your ancestors walked this exact route, their feet pressing into the same earth. And if you're lucky and skilled, your descendants will too. You shift your carrying pouch to a more comfortable position and adjust your grip on your digging stick. The morning is young, and there's a full day of work ahead. Time to go find what the forest, in its vast, indifferent generosity, has to offer today. Behind you, the hunters are making their final, solemn preparations, checking spear points, discussing strategy, sharing the precious few arrows tipped with the sharpest stone points your group can make. Ahead of you, the gathering party moves through the forest with practiced, almost supernatural silence, eyes and ears constantly alert for anything useful. This is it. This is your life. This is what it really means to be human, stripped bare of all the comforts and complexities of the modern world. Your muscles relax as you settle into the familiar rhythm of walking through your territory, and with each step, the adventure of another day in the Paleolithic world begins to unfold around you. The forest closes around you like a living, breathing thing. Every step takes you deeper into a world that's both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying, where every shadow could hide food or danger, and sometimes both at the same time. You're moving through what will someday be called an old-growth forest, a majestic, ancient landscape. But right now, it's just the world. Trees that have been growing for centuries stretch up into a canopy so thick that the morning light filters down in shifting ethereal beams and patches like spotlights on a natural stage. Oak and ash and beech trees, their massive trunks so wide it would take 6 people holding hands to circle them. The understory is dense with smaller trees and shrubs, and the forest floor is carpeted with layers of decomposing leaves that squelch softly under your feet with every step. A symphony of organic decomposition. The sounds here are incredible. Birds everywhere. Not just the few species you'd hear in a modern park, but dozens of different distinct calls echoing through the trees. A constant, intricate avian chorus. The subtle rustle of small animals moving stealthily through the undergrowth, foraging for their own breakfast. The distant, ominous crack of a branch falling somewhere in the depths of the forest, a stark reminder of nature's raw power. Wind moving through leaves in waves that you can actually hear approaching and passing overhead, like a gentle, unseen river flowing through the air. Your gathering party spreads out as you walk, a finely tuned, organic machine. Each person follows their own intuitive path, but always staying within earshot of the others. You never, ever go anywhere alone. Being alone in this world is basically a death sentence. Predators hunt alone, humans do not. Accidents happen, a twisted ankle, a snake bite, and getting lost means dying, and dying means your family doesn't eat. It's the ultimate lesson in teamwork. Kessa, who's probably the best plant identifier in your group, calls out softly from about 20 feet to your left. Her voice has that particular, almost reverent quietness that means she's found something significant. You angle toward her voice, pushing through a thicket of hazelnut bushes that catch annoyingly at your leather clothing and scratch at your exposed skin. She's kneeling beside a cluster of plants with broad, heart-shaped leaves and small white flowers. "Wild garlic," she says, and the satisfaction in her voice is palpable, almost euphoric. This is a genuinely good find, not just food, but medicine too. Wild garlic can help with infections, and perhaps more importantly, it adds flavour to otherwise bland, unseasoned meals. Imagine the culinary delights. You help her carefully dig up several of the bulbs using your wooden digging sticks. The tools are simple, but incredibly effective. Hardwood sticks about as long as your arm, sharpened to a point, and hardened in fire. They're perfect for digging roots and tubers without damaging them. The bulbs come up easily in the soft forest soil. They're small, about the size of your thumb, with papery white skin and that unmistakable, wonderfully sharp smell of garlic. Kessa rubs one clean against her leather tunic and bites into it, chewing thoughtfully. "Good," she says, a rare smile gracing her lips. "Strong. These will keep well." You wrap the bulbs carefully in a piece of soft leather and tuck them into your carrying pouch. So far, so good. The day is off to a promising start, meaning you might not starve today. Your group continues deeper into the forest, following ancient animal trails and paths that your people have used for generations. Every few hundred yards, someone finds something worth collecting. Nuts from hazelnut bushes, berries that are just starting to ripen, wild mushrooms growing on rotting logs, but only the ones that experienced gatherers know, unequivocally, are safe. The sheer volume of knowledge required for this work is staggering. You need to know hundreds of different plants, their seasons, their preferred habitats, how to process them. Some require complex preparation to remove toxins, how to store them for the harsh winter months. Some plants are only edible at certain times of year. Some look almost identical to poisonous varieties, but have subtle, almost imperceptible differences that can literally mean the difference between a good meal and a horrible, agonizing death. Take mushrooms, for example. There are dozens of edible varieties in your forest, but also several that will kill you in very unpleasant ways. The difference between food and poison might be the colour of the spores, or the way the stem breaks, or the exact smell when the mushroom is crushed. Get it wrong, and you're dead. Get it right, and you have a delicious, nutritious meal. Your people have been learning these crucial distinctions for thousands upon thousands of years, passing the knowledge down through incredibly careful teaching and observation. No one forages alone until they've spent years learning from experts, until their knowledge is as deep and reliable as the forest itself. Even now, experienced as you are, you still instinctively check with others when you find something unusual or questionable. When it comes to fungi, a second opinion is always a good idea. The sun climbs higher as your group works its way deeper through the forest, and you can feel the day starting to warm up. The morning chill is lifting, and walking at a steady pace is starting to make you pleasantly warm under your leather clothing. You adjust your carrying pouch and keep moving, a silent, efficient hunter-gatherer machine. About an hour into the expedition, Toma calls out from near a stream bank. His voice has that particular excitement, that almost childlike glee, that means he's found something really, really good. You push through the undergrowth toward the sound, a surge of adrenaline pushing you forward, and what you see makes you genuinely smile. Wild honey. High up in an old gnarled oak tree, maybe 20 feet off the ground, there's a dark, inviting opening in the trunk where a colony of wild bees has made their home. You can see them coming and going, a busy, buzzing stream of tiny workers, and that unbelievably sweet smell of honey is faint but unmistakable on the breeze. Honey is like winning the Paleolithic lottery. It's concentrated energy, pure sugars that your body craves and burns efficiently. It keeps well without spoiling. It has medicinal properties, and it tastes absolutely incredible, especially when your normal diet consists of meat, nuts, and whatever root vegetables you can dig up. But getting it is incredibly dangerous work. The plan develops quickly, a seamless, wordless choreography born of necessity. Toma is the best climber in your group, and he volunteers to go up. You'll build a fire at the base of the tree and create a thick cloud of smoke to calm the bees. Someone else will prepare containers to hold the precious honeycomb. Everyone else will be ready to run if things go badly, because wild bees are not docile. They will defend their hive aggressively, and stings can be seriously dangerous if you get enough of them. People have died trying to collect honey, a tragic testament to its value, but the reward is almost always worth the risk. You gather dry wood and tinder while others search for the right kind of green leaves to create heavy, choking smoke. The fire needs to produce a lot of smoke without too much flame. You want to calm the bees, not burn down the entire forest, or your valuable honey tree. The fire catches quickly, and soon you have thick white smoke rolling up toward the bee tree. The sound of buzzing gets quieter, a hopeful sign, as the smoke reaches the hive entrance. Bees evolved with forest fires, and smoke triggers their instinct to gorge on honey and prepare to abandon the hive. When they're focused on eating, they're less likely to attack. Clever little things. Toma strips off most of his clothing. Fewer places for angry bees to get caught, a practical touch, and starts climbing. He's incredibly skilled, moving up the rough bark with the fluid confidence of someone who's been climbing trees since he could walk. His feet and hands find holds that you can barely see from the ground, almost like he's part of the tree. Watching him climb, you're reminded of just how physically capable your people are. No gyms, no structured exercise programs, but everyone is lean, strong, and flexible from a lifetime of this kind of activity. Toma moves like a modern rock climber, but he learned these skills as a child, not for sport, but because his very life depends on them. The smoke continues to roll up the tree, A comforting visual signal, and the buzzing stays relatively quiet. Good sign. Toma reaches the level of the hive and carefully begins working his hand into the opening. He's feeling for honeycomb that can be removed without destroying the entire colony. Your people know not to take everything. Leave enough honey and bees, and they'll rebuild for next time. It's sustainable harvesting, millennia before the term existed. A few bees spiral frantically around him, but they seem more confused and disoriented than aggressive. The smoke is doing its job. Toma's arm disappears into the tree trunk up to his elbow, and his face shows intense concentration as he feels around inside the hive. Then his expression changes to one of pure satisfaction, a wide, relieved grin. He's found good comb. Slowly, carefully, he extracts his arm from the tree. In his hand is a glorious chunk of honeycomb, about the size of your fist, golden and dripping with thick amber honey. Even from the ground you can smell the overwhelming sweetness, a truly intoxicating aroma. He tosses the comb down to waiting, eager hands, then reaches back into the hive for more. 3 trips, 3 magnificent chunks of comb, and then he judges it's time to stop. Take too much, and you'll kill the colony. Take just enough, and they'll recover and provide honey again in the future. Toma scrambles down the tree with the same incredible skill he showed going up, dropping the last few feet to land lightly on the forest floor, a soft thud. A few stings on his arms and shoulders, angry red welts, but nothing serious. He's grinning, not just from the honey, but with the profound satisfaction of a job well done. The honeycomb is gorgeous. Wax cells filled with honey so pure and concentrated, it seems to glow in the dappled forest light, reflecting the sun in liquid gold. You can't resist breaking off a small piece and putting it in your mouth. The sweetness explodes across your tongue like nothing in the modern world. This isn't processed sugar or corn syrup, no artificial flavors. This is pure honey, made by wild bees from the nectar of wild flowers. It's complex and floral and intensely mind-numbingly sweet, and your body responds immediately with that rush of energy that comes from natural sugars hitting your bloodstream. You close your eyes for a moment, savouring the taste, letting the pure, ancient sweetness wash over you. Honey like this was the sweetest thing available to humans for tens of thousands of years. No chocolate, no candy, no elaborate desserts, just this, and it is utterly and completely perfect. The honeycomb gets carefully wrapped and packed away in leather containers. This is a treasure that will be shared with the entire band back at the cave. Children will get small pieces as precious treats. Adults will use it to make other foods more palatable, a rare culinary luxury. Some will be saved for winter, when every single calorie counts for survival. Your gathering party continues through the forest, energized by the successful honey collection, a shared victory that boosts everyone's spirits. The sun is getting higher now, and the forest is fully alive with activity. Birds calling from every direction, small animals rustling through the undergrowth, the constant subtle movement of a healthy, vibrant ecosystem. You find yourself settling into the meditation of long-distance walking through familiar territory. Your feet know this ground instinctively, guiding you without conscious thought. Your eyes automatically scan for useful plants, for signs of game, for anything out of place that might indicate danger. Your breathing falls into a steady rhythm that matches your pace, a profound internal connection to the earth beneath your feet. This is one of the most peaceful times in Paleolithic life, moving through the forest with your community, working together, using skills that connect you directly to the natural world. No schedules, no deadlines, no artificial stress. Just the ancient, comforting rhythm of human life in harmony with the environment. Well, mostly harmony. There are still plenty of very, very nasty ways to die out here. Around midday, your group stops beside a small stream to rest and eat. The water is clear and cold, running over smooth, polished stones worn by countless years of current. You cup it in your hands and drink deeply, tasting the raw, mineral purity of water that has never been processed or treated or run through a pipe. Lunch is a selection of what you've gathered so far. Nuts, berries, some leftover meat from yesterday, and tiny, precious tastes of that divine honey. You sit on a fallen log beside the stream, listening to the gentle murmur of the water and eating slowly, methodically. The food is challenging by modern standards. The meat is tough and requires serious chewing. The nuts are small and sometimes bitter. The berries are tart and seedy. Nothing is salted or seasoned or prepared in ways that enhance flavour. But your body knows this food, recognizes it, processes it efficiently. And there's something deeply, profoundly satisfying about eating food you gathered yourself, with your own hands, using knowledge passed down through generations of your ancestors. This meal represents hours of skilled work and a deep, intuitive understanding of the natural world. Every single bite was earned. As you eat, you notice how your body feels. Strong, lean, incredibly efficient. Your muscles are dense and functional from constant physical activity. Your senses are sharp, honed to an exquisite degree from relying on them for sheer survival. Your mind is calm but alert, constantly processing information about your environment, evaluating threats and opportunities. This, you realize, is what human bodies were designed for. Not sitting in chairs for 8 hours a day, not eating processed foods, not living under artificial light. This, moving through natural landscapes, eating food you collected yourself, working collaboratively with your community to solve the daily fundamental challenges of survival. It's an exhausting, exhilarating, and surprisingly fulfilling existence. After the meal, your group splits up to cover more territory, a strategic dispersal. You partner with Denny, an older woman who knows more about medicinal plants than anyone else in your band. She's teaching you to identify specific herbs that can treat pain, infection, digestive problems, and other common ailments. The two of you work your way meticulously along the stream bank, where many useful plants grow in the rich, moist soil. Denny shows you how to recognize willow bark, which can be chewed to relieve pain and fever, the same active ingredient that's in modern aspirin, mind-blowing to consider. She points out wild mint growing in shady spots, good for stomach troubles. You find cattail roots growing in the marshy areas near the stream, starchy tubers that can be roasted or ground into flour. The knowledge Denny shares with you represents thousands of years of human experimentation with natural medicine, a profound testament to observation and trial and error. Your people have no doctors, no hospitals, no pharmacies. What they have is a detailed, painstakingly acquired understanding of which plants can heal and which can harm. Some of this knowledge is startlingly sophisticated. They know which mushrooms have antibiotic properties. They understand how to use certain plants to induce labor during difficult births, or to prevent pregnancy when resources are scarce. But they also know the brutal limitations of plant medicine. Serious injuries often mean death. Infections that modern antibiotics could cure easily become fatal. Childbirth is always dangerous. Life expectancy is much, much shorter than in the modern world. You live fast, you die young, and you leave a very small, perfectly preserved skeleton for archaeologists to find. The afternoon passes in this way, walking, searching, learning, collecting. Your carrying pouch gets noticeably heavier as you add more plants and roots and other useful materials. The sun moves across the sky, and the light in the forest shifts from the bright glare of midday to the warmer, slanted, golden rays of late afternoon. You're getting tired, not utterly exhausted, but pleasantly fatigued from a day of steady, purposeful physical activity. Your legs feel the miles you've walked. Your back feels the weight of your collecting pouch. Your hands are stained with plant juices and dirt from digging in the forest soil. But you're also deeply satisfied. This has been a good day. Your group has collected enough food and materials to make the expedition worthwhile. The honey alone makes this a successful trip. But you've also gathered enough plants and nuts to contribute meaningfully to tonight's communal meal. As the sun starts to sink lower in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows, Denny calls the group together for the return journey. Time to head back to the cave, she says, her voice low and firm. You don't want to be caught in the forest after dark. Night belongs to the predators, and you are not on their menu tonight if you can help it. The walk back follows a different route than your morning path. Your people never travel the same way twice if they can help it. Predictable routes make you vulnerable to predators, or worse, to rival groups of humans. You're heading home, back to the fire, back to the familiar, comforting smells of the cave. And as the last rays of sun disappear behind the distant hills, you feel a profound gratitude for your band, for your skills, and for the simple fact of still being alive. The Paleolithic world is a tough gig, but for tonight, you've survived, and tomorrow the whole thing starts again